and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is invitation to speak. Does anyone have any comments that they would like to make? Ladies?
Is this better time than the follow-up?
No, this would be the time.
Fine, okay, so, you just.
Could you
would like-
please state your name and address?
Amanda Zani, 38 Fourth Avenue. We made a statement several weeks ago, and we've been corresponding, with Eugene, as well as, Robert Caldo as well. So we'd just like to follow up on setting up that date for,
Sure.
a separate meeting to have our questions and concerns addressed.
Right, and it will be a regular school committee meeting. It just won't be stuck in the middle of all the regular business. You know,
Okay.
we'll be able to really focus on your comments and concerns.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so,
Can I follow up with, is that gonna, am I gonna be, set tonight? We were just wondering, where in the calendar it would fall in terms of budgeting discussions and stuff like that.
where in the budgeting discussions it will
Where
fall?
in the timeline, so as to how it would
It-
affect.
The first meeting of January, we're going to have the first, budget overview this evening.
Okay.
But it's going to be just a very top level.
Yeah.
Okay, not detailed. So January is really when the process starts, so it's a great time to do it.
Okay.
Okay, and I believe that you had requested that parents be informed that we are searching for more ESPs so that there will be one in each kindergarten class. Okay, and we have started that process. I don't know if we've had results yet or not. But it
The goal
was
is to get
posted,
them.
it was advertised last week. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dates?
Yes, so, we could do a weeknight, or we could do a Saturday morning. If you could all check your calendars and see what might work for you. I didn't take my calendar.
And we need a quorum, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, we need at least three.
Yes, yes.
Jenny Malinowski, quick question on the ESP comment you just mentioned. Is the ESP posting for this year?
Yes,
still?
for the-
Or-
yes.
And for the future?
Or we don't know what the numbers look like, so we're certainly not going to we're not gonna have 8 ESPs if we need 4, for example.
Sure.
I mean, it's not, we don't have 8 kindergarten classrooms, but I'm just stating that, we don't know what the numbers will look like for next year.
Or we'll look to maintain one per classroom?
Yes,
Great.
yes.
Thank you.
All right, so what does everyone's schedule look like for January? And do you ladies have any feel for, dates that would work for your group?
The first full week of January is a little bit tough for me.
Okay.
I know.
All right. So we could do it, either the 13th of January, which is a Wednesday night, which is a regular school committee night, but not not a meeting.
Right.
We only have 2 meetings a month.
Safe harbor that night.
Oh, okay, this is safe harbor.
CPAC on the, oh no, the 12th is the night before, so it just might be a busy week calendar-wise, I don't know.
Okay. All right, so there's a safe harbor meeting on the 13th, so that's a conflict.
Between your meetings to look,
Okay.
not to interrupt you.
All right, great, because I haven't been able to finish one. Yeah.
So be it. Yep. I'm out of town that week, but as long as you just need a quorum, it's.
Okay,
What
All
about
right.
the 14th, Jean?
that works for me. It's a Thursday,
Thursday?
The middle school winter.
Thursday the 14th.
That
What is
works
it?
for me.
I have the middle school winter concert in my calendar.
Well,
Okay.
What time is the middle school?
7.
7?
So it's I just have it, well, Jenna put in there 7 to 8:30, I'm sure it's not that long, but I just know it says 7.
Okay, well, I think we have to choose between
Right.
CPAC, again, the safe harbor, I arrived late last time and that was okay, so
Mhm.
if we would wanna do it on Wednesday the 13th, if that works for folks, and I'll just let Christine know that whoever's gonna attend the school committee is arriving late.
Okay, it would probably be very late. That's the only problem.
Yeah.
If we start at 7,
Okay.
Can we start at 6?
it's fine with me. Do you wanna, does 6 o'clock work for you? On the 13th?
13th?
Yeah.
Do you think that's gonna pull, I mean,
I know,
Tough
tough
with-
time for
For,
parents.
yeah, with
Kindergarten.
young children and dinner hour.
I mean, 6:30 or 7 would be preferable.
There's no way to do a regular school committee with all the other meetings going on.
Because the budget process is just starting, there'll be many presentations that it will go longer.
This goes all the way through end of March, so.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you
Yeah.
trying. I know that it's tough
So
going.
I'm indifferent, I think we just need to call the 13th or the 14th. Jeannie, make the call.
Okay, either that or how about the 16th, which is a Saturday morning, if we did like a breakfast meeting?
Personally,
You'd rather not do
I'd rather not do a Saturday.
Okay, all right, that's fine. So why don't we say the 14th?
I
That's
mean, if
a-
the week before is better, like the 7th, is there something on the 7th?
Do you have anything on your calendar for the 7th, Barbara? How about everybody else?
What day is that?
It's a Thursday.
Thursday the 7th, January.
We can try to finesse that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So the 7th?
January 7th at 7 PM.
Okay. Here.
Yep.
Yes, yep, and we'll post it,
Okay.
okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And hopefully by then we'll have some updates around what the response to the postings looks like by January 7th, right? We should have a good feel.
Oh, I would think.
I would think so. I would think we'd be well underway. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, she, yeah.
We'd be well underway by that point. I can't say for certain we'd have somebody hired, but we'd certainly be in the process.
Okay, and can you speak to whether or not people are applying yet?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I just got another one today.
So how many applications do you think you have, ballpark?
I'm not sure, honestly, I have to go back and check. I know we have some, I suspect we have somewhere around 8. I don't
Okay.
know where.
All right, so if we could look at those and see where we're at, and see who we want to interview, and maybe they'll be available the week between the holidays.
Yeah, interviewing, yeah.
Yes.
And they would be full-time in the K grade classrooms, not
Yes.
shared.
Not shared,
Okay.
in the
100%
kindergarten
of the
classrooms.
would be in K grade.
Yep.
When they're at activities, what happens?
Yeah, now, maybe Mr. LeCount could answer what happens when they're at specialists, or do they go to, what would they be doing, what would their responsibilities be?
Well, to direct my answer to that question,
Absolutely.
if I may.
Yes,
We will have a person in each class. There may be split shifts or something like that. We're going to try and keep somebody in the class all day. But there may be other needs that somebody who has a specialty has to work with somebody over here or something like that. But there will be support in the classrooms throughout the day.
Okay.
there
But
will be
It may
some,
not be the exact same person
Yeah.
all the time. We're gonna aim for that,
Yeah.
but I can't say confidently now that that's the way it will be, depending on the skill set.
okay, and as we stated earlier, you know, hopefully by the 7th, we'll have some more answers for you, and we'll know exactly what's what. Okay? All right. Yeah, I already got it on here. Okay. Some of you may have read the Patriot Ledger already this evening. There was a statement, I was contacted by one of the reporters, just looking for an update on the contract. And I did tell him that we're this close to a signature. But it is not signed yet. We have language on one item. He asked me if that was related to money, and I said, no, that was, we thought, settled. And he took it as, it's definitely settled. So, just so you know, we're just waiting for confirmation back from them. Their MTA rep has been on vacation, so it's caused a slight delay, so we're hoping that as soon as we get back to school after the holidays, we'll be in good shape and we'll be ready to sign. Okay? All right. Those are my two little to-dos here. And next on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
So there's a number of things we'll be talking about tonight, but the first and very important item is the special education presentation by Mary Buchanan, our Director of Student Services. And I know she has a PowerPoint, and I sent a document to you over the weekend do you need a hard copy of that? 'Cause if you do, I just have to run down and go grab them.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Mary be.
I have the I teach copy of the PowerPoint, which has the information on
Do,
it.
would you prefer that, is that okay, and then I can do the doc after, she has
Sure,
copies.
that's fine.
of PowerPoint?
I
Okay.
have one copy of that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I just
Yes.
can't always see what's on the screen, Mary, so.
Oh, did she put, it's not in my packet.
No.
Cause I
Okay.
printed it from your email and then I had a second copy.
All right, I was not aware it went into the packet.
No, it came separately.
Yeah, all right, that's fine. We can get hard copies after.
Now we can take cookies.
I still can't see.
And
They're still warm, Mary.
yeah, they are still, they came off colored. So when Dave somehow put my presentation up here, it was a pretty beige, so it was kind of, warming to the eyes. But somehow he made it all, black and white, because he didn't want his to be less colorful than mine, so. So last year, I'm sorry for my back to folks.
Yeah.
She said. So last year, we had talked about, preschool, and, we had talked about sort of the numbers had been dwindling, and, there was much conversation about that. So we had talked about, the need to do an outside evaluation, so we contracted with Walker Partnership, which they, provide services in schools. They'll come in and they'll do a comprehensive evaluation of programming. And it's a third party, so it's not, you're not going in and you're questioning your own staff and doing your own observations. So I feel as though it's a nice, way to get a picture of what's happening. So Sally Smith, completed this in October. We have not, all I have received so far is the draft of the Walker Partnership. Once they did tell me that the final, the final copy would be available before Christmas. There was some complication, on the person's part that completed it. So this is a summary. Nothing in this is my own words. The only thing corrections I've made is some, spelling corrections. So it is not, from my lens that this presentation is taking place. It's from, Sally's, perspective. So I just wanted to add that. So the report was broken up into a couple of different parts. It started with, the commendations. There are some really great things that are happening, and so that's the first part. There are 2 preschool teachers that bring a wealth of knowledge to the preschool program. The classrooms are well equipped with developmentally appropriate materials, learning centers for math and science and literacy, dramatic play, and whole class learning activities. The classroom schedules and rules are developmentally appropriate. There's a strong collaboration between the teachers, the ESPs, and the related service providers, the speech, OT and PT. There are iPads in the classrooms and a smart board in one of the classrooms. They're currently using Lively Letters as a reading program, and that's a great program for young children. They take the letters and sounds and they use developmentally appropriate colorful characters for letter identification and phonemic awareness. Preschool is currently using Second Steps along with social thinking curriculum. The teachers use the Understanding by Design concepts and the Massachusetts frameworks to deliver the classroom instruction. Teachers implement similar curriculums, but they're using different materials. So there are 2 different integrated preschool classrooms, and so there are 2 different teachers. So they are teaching the same concepts, but they use different materials.
And by different materials,
In other words, if somebody was using one book to introduce, a concept, the other teacher may use something else. They may be using Lively Letters, but they wouldn't necessarily be on the same page at the same time.
okay.
So right now-
But they're both using Lively Letters.
Yes, they are both using Lively Letters.
Okay.
Additional commendations, so they use handwriting without tears. Right now, we have an elementary preschool team chairperson who will chair all initial and reevaluation team meetings for preschoolers. And they're also chairing meetings for transition between pre-K and K. We have a behaviorist, we have a board certified behavior analyst, who works to assess the programs, trains preschool staff on implementation and data collection for students requiring ABA and discrete, it says trail work, it should be trial work. I'm not doing trails, but it should be trial, sorry about that. I knew this is where spell check is not good. So ABA is applied behavioral, analyst and its strategies that is, for direct teaching. The principal is a strong advocate for the preschool level and welcomes preschool to assembly, school function, and monthly staff meetings. There is a use of progress monitoring tools to assess literacy and math skills, and there's outstanding communication between home and school.
Is the behaviorist exclusive to the preschool, or is it part
She's-
of the Osgood
She's district-wide,
district? Okay.
yes.
And a similar question, just to clarify for me, the elementary and preschool team chair, is that the one team chair that we see in the budget at Deer Hill, but it's shared between Deer Hill, Osgood, and pre-K?
Yes.
Okay.
She also does some out of district, so our out of district, students in out of district placement, she does about a quarter of the students in out of district placements as well, chairing
Okay.
those team meetings.
Gotcha.
Does she do only elementary out of district, or it depends on the case?
We broke up the caseload for out of district, so we have people that typically are at the same school, the same programs. So and if people have relationships with families, we tried to keep that, so there'd be that continuity between that. The other team chairperson does about a quarter, and I do 50% of the out of district chairing the team meetings. So then the second section of the report talks about specific findings. So these were things that she found, they weren't necessarily, huge areas of concern, but they were things that she wanted to, further inspect or investigate. So there's fragmented supervision of preschool. Right now, the, supervision of preschool is shared between myself, Mr. LeCount, and the team chairperson, so everybody, you're still there, right? So people have different responsibilities, so there has been not some confusion, but it's broken up between people that are building based, which Mr. LeCount is there every day as the building principal. The team chairperson is between the two buildings, and I'm district wide. So she felt as though there was some fragmented supervision of the preschool. The current configuration of 2 a.m. and 1 p.m. preschool does not make economic or programmatic sense, given the class sizes. She also was concerned that the psychologist was not involved in the assessment process. She felt there was too infrequent communication between the Director of Student Services and preschool teachers. Right now, we're only meeting on a monthly basis, and she felt as though it should really be much more. The use of the Battelle Developmental Inventory is used for screening and eligibility determination. And that's the same tool that is being used by EI, so sometimes there's overlapping of testing, which is not giving us a clear picture for students' eligibility or the determination for special education services. Preschool teachers and kindergarten teachers do not visit each other's classrooms on a regular basis. Additional findings, there's a lack of entrance and exit criteria for classroom placement and service options. Classroom placements are not mixed ages. Right now, we have a 3-year-old classroom, and then we have 2 4-year-old classrooms. The person that, so Sally felt as though it's much more commonplace now in Massachusetts where you'd have 3 and 4-year-olds together. The process for selecting community peers is not clear. There's not a documented pre-K to K transition process. Currently, the community peers do not pay for the extended day lunch bunch program. We put it in place, not this school year, but last school year as a pilot, and we're also piloting again this year. But that was something that she felt we should add a fee for the typical peers in that lunch bunch group.
Was that granted last year?
No.
It wasn't?
No. There is not a standard-based written progress report for all students, so there's not sort of a preschool report card that is being issued to parents. Students that are on IEPs do get, 3 progress reports, throughout the year, so they're working towards their goals, but there isn't something that talks about what all the students are typically doing. Right now, the related service providers are, providing, related services, speech, occupational therapy, and physical therapy more in a pull-out model, so outside of that classroom. And she's recommending that there should be more push-in, services.
I just wanted to circle back to one comment you made
Sure.
about the configuration of 2 AM and 1 PM. You made a comment about class sizes. Was
Yes.
that in relation to the number of students that are on IEPs?
Yes, so there, and it does come up with, an additional, but right now, we have spots that we would, for special education students, the way the classes are configured right now, we would have the ability to have, 21 students on IEPs, with the current configuration of 2 AM classrooms and 1 PM classroom. Currently, we still have 11 slots left for this academic year, that would meet the 50-49 split. The preschool has a ratio of what class sizes should be. So a class that has, up to 15 students, there can be 7 students on IEPs and 8 typically developing peers. And then there has to be a preschool teacher and, an aide at all times. Even if you use a related service provider, that doesn't count. So if a speech person came in, that doesn't count as sort of the second person. So there are always supposed to be 2 people in the classroom. So we could have class sizes of 15,
Yep.
7 students with IEPs per class, and 8 typical developing peers.
And that 15, is that the state maximum?
Yes, that is the state maximum, through the Early Childhood Advisory Council, there is, a document, Early Childhood Program Standards. On page 27, it talks about group sizing.
Okay.
So up to 12 students, less than 50% of the students can have, IEPs, 13 to 14 students. There can be a maximum of 6 students on IEPs, 15 students, there can be a maximum of 7. And if you go above 15 students, so 16 to 20, 20 is the absolute cap. But you can only have 5 students on IEPs at that point, just because the class size becomes, this says because the larger group size, fewer children on IEPs can be served effectively. So this is the information that comes from EEC.
For 16 to 20, did they have to hire another aide or anything, or it still stays within?
It still stays, so there has to be
Just the IEP amount goes down.
yes, correct.
And did Sally comment on what kind of best practices was in terms of the size? I mean, I know those are the state ranges, but then there's the practice.
Yes, she actually, to try to make it an overview, I didn't, put all of the information in there regarding that, but, her specific recommendation, was basically that, can I try to find that? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's fine. I was just curious if if you can't find it easily, I was just curious if in the report there was a more specific recommendation for Cohasset based on her work in the field.
Yes, so, she had said, her language that she said, using the mandated 49-51% model for an inclusive preschool, special needs to no special needs, the 3 classes as they currently exist could accommodate up to 21 students on IEPs and 24 community students. There are still 11 openings for this school year for preschool special needs, but with the information from early intervention, the numbers of students that will likely qualify for classroom placements for the remainder of the year is 4. The overall referral for 14-15 indicates there were 18 referrals known for this year, and 6 required classroom placements. she had just put the district, I mean, she had talked about that 15 was sort
Okay.
of the number that she had
Okay.
recommended in here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
No, I think the ratio is the interesting piece, cause the ratio drives a lot of the conversation.
Right.
Okay.
Let's see, did we go through, is there any other questions on this page?
No, thank you.
So these were the recommendations that, came from the evaluation. So the first one, there were 6 items that she felt really should be addressed. And the first thing she thought was that there need to be increased supervision and support to the preschool staff. There should be somebody that is in charge of the oversight of the screening and assessment of new referrals, observations, team meetings, IEP development, curriculum development, materials, preparation for implementation, grant writing, data for mass indicators. So for, just what that means is, special ed, reporting selects different, and right now we're in a cohort where we're gathering information regarding preschool entrance and exit criteria, as well as students transitioning from high school. So there's a lot of data and forms that are collected. So that just talks a little bit about that. Ongoing program development to meet the changing needs of more complex students, implementing effective transition procedures from EI to preschool, and then preschool again to kindergarten. The thing that she thought was so important, the decision for special needs student classroom placerooms should be discussed with the team, but ultimately decided by a administrator. She really felt as though prior to last year, the teachers were doing the evaluation consent forms, they were doing the actual assessment process, they were chairing and making the educational decisions. So there's a lot of administrative decisions that ultimately there will be a relationship between the preschool teacher and the parent, and if there was something that was in disagreement, it may affect the relationship between the teacher and the teacher and the parent. So they try to take it out of the person that's gonna be directly working with the students. Early intervention should have one contact person to discuss referrals, observe students attending transition meetings, and this contact person should not potentially be a classroom teacher. Preschool team should meet on a bi-weekly basis to review curriculum, current students, referred students, assessment practices, and program configurations and needs.
I have a question. Did Sally, advise if she felt that we had staff in place to do these bullet points, or was she recommending a new?
So, that is, I think it's, .5 that I'll go on to
Okay.
sort of that.
Okay.
But yes,
It's
head
coming.
count.
Yeah, well, I read it in the overview, yeah, but I
Yep.
just,
So she felt as though this additional, position could be covered by increasing the team chair's responsibilities.
for
And
preschool and.
for preschool and-
offsetting some of her other responsibilities?
Yes, so it would be a combination of, my position, Director of Student Services, and the team chairperson. It's really good to have somebody that's in the building on a daily or, pretty regular basis. And Laurie, is currently our team chairperson at that level. And so it would be increasing, the recommendation would be increasing her responsibilities. So currently, she is not doing, the observations for EI. She is doing some of the transition. She's not doing the mass indicators, I'm doing that. She's not doing the grant writing, that's a combination. I'm doing the grant writing at this point for, preschool programming for special education.
And so this position that you're describing is the early childhood coordinator position?
I don't think we would have to add that term to it. I think
Yeah.
we would we would change the job description of what the team chairperson is currently doing. That EI, intervention and that part is not part of the team chairperson's current responsibilities. So it is changing that slightly.
So just so I'm clear, the additions to the job description that she was recommending were EI and what else?
So EI, IEP development, curriculum development, material preparation for implementation, grant writing, data collection for the mass indicators.
That's the communication.
Yeah, Katie, it's just that first slide.
It's that first,
on
the first
PowerPoint.
bullet under that.
Oh, okay,
So
so
that
every,
would-
everything under all
Yes.
these sub-bullet points
Yes.
are what,
What, so
gotcha.
those are that's the rationale why the title is being put in place. So she feels as though these 4 reasons are the reason why we need to increase the supervision and support.
I got,
Should sort of be the team chair's job anyway, right? I mean, that's what they normally do for, I mean, when you talk about the point person,
The-
basically.
So they would be, so I guess, they wouldn't necessarily be, oversight of screening and assessment of new referrals. So currently, that would be something that was new.
More in this, okay.
Doing the observations in a other preschool setting or an EI setting, or doing home visits, because that is part of the initial, assessment process, is that you go and you, observe the student in their natural setting. And that may be, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, you finish your thought.
So that may be somebody's home, it may be a private preschool, it could be, any of those places. And it may be more than one visit that you're doing.
Did she feel like part of it was maybe just that things weren't clearly delineated, or did she
Well-
just feel like there were holes?
It's not that there are gaps, there are just a lot of different people doing a lot of different things. So
Okay.
right now,
And did everyone understand what everybody else was doing, or did she feel like that needs to be sort of bulleted out more and?
we definitely need to talk about
Someone needs
the
to talk about
process
it.
of, preschool and sort of what's happening. I think we need to have, clearer steps, regarding, the programming, the process for finding students eligible for special education, the team process, and then also even our, peer role models. So there needs to be an improved, process for that.
And is there wiggle room in this person's, in the team chair's contract that allows for these changes in their job?
I feel as though that we could, do that, but I think that it would be,
I mean, it's a discussion, it's a
yeah.
big discussion.
yes.
Because it seems to me if that person has been doing this job all along and then we decide that we're gonna change that job, we don't wanna get into trouble on that.
So.
And if this person is taking on more responsibility
Mhm.
in a different manner than some of that person's responsibilities currently may fall to someone else. So I'm just
So
thinking of the
right-
human resources aspect
Yeah.
of all of this.
So in part 2 discussion.
Yep, so again, so right now, I am a point person for EI, she's also contacting EI. The new referrals, she would be generating that is part of what her current job description is. She hasn't done observations this year, right now that is still being done by the classroom teachers. She is running the team meetings and the classroom teachers are developing the IEPs, she would be checking that, and I would be checking that. She isn't involved in the curriculum development at this point, or the material preparation for that. She's not involved in the grant writing, I'm doing the grant writing. The data collection for mass indicators is a combination of myself, she is a point person, and then the classroom teachers are completing that. Ongoing program development to meet the needs, that's a combination of all of us right now.
My concern is more about continuity of services, and we've had some year-over-year changes in team chair and team chair responsibilities. So I think that it's really important to retain good people. And
That's my thought.
and changes like this don't always lead to that, and the discussion of that has to happen before the changes happen, so that everybody's on board.
Right, so so Laurie Dolan, who is the team chairperson at this point, she was part of this evaluation that was completed. At the end, we sat down with with Sally, and we talked about, you know, just her sort of first thoughts and recommendations, and this was something that we did discuss at the end of the, process. It's something that she's definitely interested in doing. I just think that, right now, as part of developing a new or a process for the program, I think it's important that we're delineating who's doing what, so that there isn't
Absolutely.
gaps.
That's what it seems like the issue that she was
Absolutely,
identifying
it needs to be a job
was.
description,
But
particularly with all of
curriculum development's
this.
kind of a whole other ball of wax, like, it
Well-
sounds like maybe that person has experience in.
There are additional recommendations when it talks
Yeah.
about curriculum on the next couple of slides, so I think that when we go through it, there may be, if you wanna put a check next to something that you still have a question about, when we get through the slide presentation, we can definitely go back to that.
This is actually a different topic, but I just find this interesting of how it's phrased, cause it's sort of assumptive language, and I'm wondering if you saw it that way, but she says, data for, ongoing program development to meet changing needs of more complex students. That says to me that how it's written is that schools in Massachusetts are seeing more complex students who have changing needs that districts need to catch up with. Do you
So-
think that's accurate?
I think that's a great statement. I think that more and more, as we're developing comprehensive preschool programs, that we are developing programs where we are keeping more complex students in their home school.
Okay.
And that is important to me. I mean, I believe that, you know, I believe in the least restrictive environment, and I believe that by developing these comprehensive programs and having a BCBA that will oversee sort of the more challenging behavioral aspects of students, we're creating programming that can accommodate a the diverse needs of students, from students that just have, you know, occupational needs to, you know, students that just need sort of speech, to then students that need complex programming and extended day. So that is something that we are doing at this point. But, you know, more and more there are, you know, the trends sort of in special education, I feel are, there are more students with more severe disabilities being identified, and there's a host of reasons why that is happening. I think our general ed, and this is not related to Cohasset, but in general, I think that the way general ed and special education teachers are teaching, that there are less students with mild disabilities being identified because the general education programming is so strong, but there are more kids that are being introduced into school systems that have more complex and severe needs. I think we're also doing a better job of identifying kids at a younger level. Any other questions on this one? So this is continued from that last slide, so this is more of the rationale why we need that. An early childhood coordinator should establish an ongoing relationship with the private town preschools. They would help plan professional development for teachers-related service providers and assistants. Obviously, professional development still falls under the assistant superintendent, but setting up developmentally appropriate programming for that level is important. Coordinator could also provide ongoing training to classroom assistants. The responsibilities of the coordinator could be shared between the team chairperson and the director of student services. The role of the classroom teacher should be primarily teaching, monitoring the progress of students, and communicating with parents.
That's what really struck me is that last statement, which is the teacher should be focused on the kids,
Right.
and the administrator, the coordinator should be focused on everything else.
Yes.
Attenuate with this program.
Yes, that was her feeling.
Who just in curriculum and training, like, or in curriculum, who's mainly responsible for the pre-K curriculum? Is that Louise? Does she manage that as well?
Louise is in charge of curriculum for the district.
Okay.
But it's not done in complete isolation, so that when we meet, we talk about what the needs
Right.
are and how to balance all of it, so it's not, it's input from Mary for the special ed component, and then Louise is organizing.
So right now, she feels as though, looking at, we need to reorganize the current configuration of the current preschool classes. Again, this was the bullet that I had read a little bit earlier, using the mandated 49-51% model for inclusive preschool, special needs to no special needs. The 3 classrooms as they currently exist could accommodate up to 21 students and 24 community students. We should look at a mixed age classrooms, and that should be considered for the 16-17 year. The district should highly consider having 2 preschool classes for the 16-17 school year. Lunch bunch should be an additional cost for community peers. Tuition for peer models should be evaluated. The district should continue to provide full day and or extended day to meet the needs of students with more severe needs.
On the tuition piece, did she have, where did that comment come from? Because I think we have looked at it briefly and we found that we're kind of right there, in terms of the range. And so I don't know what she was observing that we didn't see.
So she just said that it should be looked at.
Okay.
She said that, that's something that typically schools look at every 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
To look to see where they, we provide 10 hours of preschool
Yeah.
programming right now, so we would wanna find comparable school districts. I don't think we're way out of line with what we're charging, but she just thought that we
Okay.
should look at it again. She had mentioned that, we should also look at the private preschools just for a comparison as well.
Yeah, so I think when we did a quick look, we're kind of in the range. Hull's the lowest at 1,700 and Norwell's kind of the highest at 3,300
Right.
for 10 hours per week.
Right in the middle.
So we're smack in the middle.
Right.
When it comes to the comparison to private, it is a whole different ballgame because the private programs are 2x.
Yes.
And that's part of the disconnect is that
Mhm.
you can get a 10-hour program in district for 2,600, but if you go to the South Shore, the community center, it's like
Yes.
it's like $5,000.
$5,500
Yeah, it's
a
like
year.
$5,500.
Yeah, actually, when Dave and I did the math, we were a little astonished.
But it was interesting, none of the districts chart, I mean, again, the max was Norwell, so there appears to be just a disconnect.
Right.
Not a disconnect, there just appears to be different pricing, between integrated programs and full third-party programs.
The thought with an integrated program is you want the peer models to come to your programming, because you want to have, students that have IEPs, and role models. So you don't wanna price yourself out of the market with preschool, so that we're competing with private, preschool programming. But, she didn't feel as though we needed to adjust it, she
Okay.
just thought it was something that it
Okay.
should be looked at sort of on a regular basis.
And maybe she was just adding it as one more
A
item on
checkback.
your checklist.
Mhm.
Perfect.
And then right now, the lunch bunch, so we provide the 10 hours of preschool programming, for the cost. Right now, we are not charged, so there are 4 hours, a week of, lunch bunch that is provided, and right now, we are not charging students for that additional 4 hours.
4 hours per week per student.
Yes. It doesn't start, so it's not the the 180 days, and it doesn't start like the first couple of
Oh,
weeks
yeah.
of school, and it ends a little bit early, so it's hard to sort of, you'd really have to look at the exact numbers to sort of come up with, a prorated, amount for that.
I remember that well.
Yeah.
That extra hour.
Key.
Yes.
Key.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and then, right now, so for students that have, IEPs where additional services are, requested or needed, we have a social pragmatic lunch group, which we use social thinking, and that does have, the role models and students with IEPs. And then we also have extended day programming for students that require ABA or direct, instruction. So there's not just a cookie cutter sort of approach to just preschool, there are different options for the students.
How long does extended day go and who does ABA?
So the ABA is overseen by our district BCBA. Currently, Michelle Curtin is providing that, direct service, to the students, in conjunction with our BCBA and the ESPs.
And does that go until, what time does it go until?
So it would be so it's not, so this would be
That's
special ed
understanding.
programming, so we would look at the individual needs for each child. So
Gotcha.
one child may need 45 minutes a day, versus another student may need an hour and a half. So it would be individually, based upon the child's need.
Okay.
Got some questions. On bullet number 3, so are they recommending that we go from having the 3 classes just to the 2 classes?
Yes.
And
No, for preschool,
For
right?
preschool.
Not pre-K.
Preschool is
It
pre-K.
is the same. Pre-K, it's the same.
Pre-K and preschool are the same.
Oh, that's
so
the
you're
same.
saying
Oh, I
mix
was
the
thinking
class,
it
so they're
was
recommending
added.
mix the classes, if I'm understanding this correctly, mixed age groups and split it just to 2 classes.
Oh.
Because the numbers are so low
Yeah.
with special education students at this point.
But I think also from the way you did that, just to make sure it's, I think you were looking at morning and afternoon, not 2 morning classes.
Yes.
We have
All
3
right.
sections,
Yeah.
the way you did that, I thought you had side by
It's
side.
two more, I
Yeah.
had it in my head as preschool and pre-K, and we have 1 preschool and 2 pre-Ks, and I thought she meant to have 2 preschools, so we had, you know what I mean, that's how I thought she wrote it.
No,
Yeah.
we have 3, currently we have 3 preschool classrooms. So we have,
Yeah, I had it separated into preschool and pre-K, cause I didn't call pre-K preschool.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so,
The
okay.
year before you go to kindergarten, quite often parents call that pre-K.
Separately as
And
preschool.
before that, they
Yeah.
call preschool.
Okay.
So
more
it's semantics.
Okay.
It's parental semantics.
Is that mixing the pre-K with, so the 4-year-olds will now would be in with 3-year-olds?
Yeah.
So kids that have done preschool are going to kindergarten a year would then be with the younger kids?
So we wouldn't mix kindergarten with preschool.
No, that's pre-K, the 4-year-olds.
So,
There's a 3-year-old.
so these
I
were the
don't- I don't
recommendations
know.
from Sally, so there's nothing that has been,
I'm sure.
there is nothing that has been decided, so I'm
Most of them
reporting
are
on what
separated.
somebody reported. So
I mean,
she
in our
is
community
reporting
ones are.
that, mixed age classrooms, are something that are much more common in Massachusetts at this point. There's an article, and I tried to Google it, to find it, and so I will have to, get that from, Sally. It's sort of the benefits of mixed age programming. The person who wrote the article is Cindy Watson. I Googled it every which way you could think of, and I couldn't find it. So I'll have to actually get that did you get it?
No,
Oh.
just curious, is the mixed age grouping typical for integrated programs?
Yes,
As well as
yes.
Okay,
It's not typical for,
no, I.
So for integrated
It's not-
programming, this is what
it is
she had
typical.
said.
No, it's separate at Carriage House. They have specific age years for their
So, I
classes.
mean.
Yes, but every once in a while, they'll have a cohort that isn't large enough and they'll mix the ages. Because it happened
It's red room at.
years ago.
It's red room at the
At the
community
community
center.
center.
I mean, yellow room is the really young kids.
Mhm.
Red room is a mixed age group, and then blue room is basically the older kids, or in my case.
No colors.
I know, the red room, but the red room has always been a mixed program.
Okay.
At the community center, in terms of mixed ages. And if you're like my son, you need to get
Carriage
a
House
little more
did not have
practice at
mixed
circle
ages.
time, you stayed for blue room.
And prior to having our own Cohasset Public Schools preschool
Mhm.
here, there was the South Shore Educational Collaborative that ran their preschool here. And one
Yes.
of my children went to that. And there were some mixed ages
So it's
she was in a
some
speech
varies.
class with, she was a typical ed student who was in a speech class.
Mhm.
And I think that works probably very well when you're doing when you're mixing the ages and the needs of students. I think it helps the educational process for the kids.
Mhm.
That's all I'm trying to say. Uh-oh.
Say your name.
Okay, one more question, because Mary still has some slides to go through.
Just a question on the, again, on the mixed classrooms. In the mixed classrooms, if we do move to this and we follow this agreement, will there be a chance to observe other mixed classrooms and see how we're keeping the curriculum fresh for the children it'll be the 4-year-olds doing it again?
Mhm.
So is there a way that we'll be able to observe and take some good copious notes on how to keep it fresh for the second year?
Yeah.
And as we move, because when the integrated preschool started 10 years ago, there was a 3-year-old 4-year-old room. And, it was the sense of moving up. And Mrs. Sabo was getting the kids in the door, the teacher with that, and then Mrs. Joyce was really the one getting the kids ready for the transition. So this is kind of new, and this would be
Yeah.
a little, I mean, obviously, the work would be done to make sure that it is a good transition for, everyone in the
Mhm.
community, but also keeping it fresh for the those 4-year-olds, exactly. And, also, I think an additional point is the lunch bunch. That is not something that was, when the integrated preschool started 10 years ago, it was not a part of it. And I think that would be something that needs definitely offered to the parents. It's another, way to have in a different type, out of a classroom setting, but in a social setting, bringing another peer to typically developing to a non-typically developing student to get together in another social setting.
I agree. I mean, I think, and currently we are using, Michelle Garcia Winner's, social thinking curriculum, exclusively with that lunch bunch, and it really is, it's a great program for, special ed and typical developing peers, and it's great because the social thinking curriculum is something that starts at a pre-K level, and it goes all the way through transition up to, students that are, going into the workforce at, 16, 17, 18. So it is language that, people really can sort of wrap their heads around, and it does develop, with the students. It's a great program, and again, these are her recommendations. I have not, before we implemented, any of the suggestions, obviously I would wanna go and do some research of my own. So this is, an outside party that came in with these recommendations. I didn't editorialize anything.
And the important thing is that she's done many, many, many programs, so she has a baseline to compare it to.
She was an early childhood coordinator for most of her career, so this is her background. So the third bullet point, for recommendations, she felt as though we should implement a core curriculum. Currently, we're using, the old Reading Streets program, that was developed for preschool. OWLS was what was created, to go along with, our current curriculum that's K through, at least K. So the OWLS, they think that we should explore this, so it's opening the world of learning. It's a literacy program.
Does that replace Lively Letters?
No, that would be in addition to
Okay.
that.
Is OWLS, because Lively Letters isn't technically a reading program, is it?
No, that's a phonics.
It's a phonics
So this would be a
awareness.
literacy program.
Okay, so, okay.
And again, before we would do any of this, we've done some research, Louise and myself have done some research as to where they are, currently using them, so we would obviously wanna go with the preschool teachers to observe that programming. She's recommending, building blocks for math, keeping social thinking. Second step, she thinks complements, social thinking for the older students, but really isn't appropriate for the 3-year-old students. It's not developmentally. And then tools of the mind, is another, curriculum that she recommended, and that's sort of, getting the kids to sort of think, use flexible thinking to start to organize, their sort of world at a preschool level. And again, these are her recommendations. We would wanna go in to look at, the implementation, and it really would be important to have the preschool teachers, look at these programs, before we do anything with that.
So is tools of the mind is sort of getting at executive functioning kind of?
It is, it's executive functioning, and it, puts them, it helps with problem solving.
Oh, okay.
It's a nice program. So she's recommending 3 new programs and 3 new curriculums for us. OWLS,
The OWLS, building blocks and tools of the mind,
Okay.
yes. I mean, she wants us to look at them and
Yeah, no.
explore them.
I understand these are all recommendations at
Right.
this point.
So we need to, she felt as though we needed to enhance our current assessment process. The preschool team, should start using an arena assessment for initial assessments and screenings. If necessary, other assessments can be completed. So an arena assessment, the TBPBA is the transdisciplinary play-based assessment, or the DAISY. They're an arena, so what would happen is the special ed teacher, the school psychologist, speech, OT, and PT possibly would sit down with the student, and it's more play-based, so it's supposed to put the child in sort of a natural setting, and you assess the child using that. And she also felt as though the school psychologist should be part of the initial evaluation process. Currently, we're not doing that. So just felt as though there should be a more comprehensive assessment process, and not using the Battelle, which is the assessment they talked about that EI was using. So really, so that we're using a more comprehensive approach to assessing students.
And currently, the preschool teachers are doing the assessment, so there's two recommendations, change
Yes.
from Patel to Arena, and change the, who is doing the assessing from the preschool teachers to the behavioralist, correct?
Or the school psychologist.
Okay.
So having more, so it's not just the special education teacher's recommendation, that you're really using a psychologist to get, who's trained to do sort of standardized, testing and assessments for students, so that you really have a combination of that, cognitive profile that a school psychologist would do. The special ed teacher would be doing more of the academic and sort of observations of how the student is interacting. Any questions on that? No? So develop and document a pre-K to K transition process. Special needs students should be strategically placed in order to have well-balanced classrooms. So this is going from a pre-K up to a K. Well-planned placement decisions, improve the sharing of assistance, grouping of students for related services, allowing for push-in therapies as opposed to pull-out. The transition process needs to be documented with timelines and involve staff members knowing their roles and responsibilities. Again, this is sort of the identification process and walking through who's doing what at what times. And it's not that it doesn't happen, it's just not as organized as it can be. The sharing of information should begin in January, and there should be a structured timeline through the spring, including the end of the year team meetings for preschool parents, so that the receiving team can then be meeting with parents to develop that. It's very difficult to move from one grade to the next, and there is a big jump from, going from a 10-hour-a-week programming to a full day. So it is a big jump, and it is scary for parents, and I think that the better the communication is with that process, the more comfortable people feel. Any questions with this? This recommendation, she feels as though we should hire a 1.0 full-time equivalent pre-K to grade 1 special education teacher trained in moderate to severe early childhood special needs. She feels as though this position would improve the continuum of services for complex students. The teacher would provide the social pragmatic language preschool lunch bunch, observe students regularly, train assistants and teachers, modify curriculum, provide pull-out sessions for preview, review, and discrete trial work with students who are identified on this caseload. So it would be for students that are identified to be sort of more involved and requiring more assistance. And this would be somebody that they could work with, during the lunch bunch in preschool. If students needed additional ABA or discrete trial or direct instruction in the afternoon or morning, this could be part of that, as well as transitioning students up to kindergarten and first grade. So that would help with that continuity piece.
And given that our Osgood is K to 2, is there any reason that she structured it pre-K to 1 specifically? I mean, I appreciate the additional resource, because it moves us away from where we are today, which is 2 special education teachers back to 3 at Osgood, but I found it interesting that she kind of took
The one, The reason
She
why.
took the 2 out. She
Right.
you know.
The reason why is, and it can be done scheduled, there isn't a problem with it if we wanted to add it to grade 2, but if you start with pre-K and go to grade 1, students can't be with it outside of 48 months in age. So in other words, you couldn't have a 3-year-old preschool student with somebody that was 49 months older, in the same room.
Okay.
So that was why this was put together, but with,
Okay.
strategic planning and sort of, case management, it's not that they couldn't service the same person, but you couldn't have a
Pull, you
Not
could,
at the same
you
time.
couldn't
Not
have
at
a
the same
pull-out
time.
Not at the
services
same
in a
time.
small group if they were
Right.
age difference greater than
Not at the
49.
same time, exactly.
You know, and also, it was also discussed that really, this would be a person that would be providing some intense, services and a resource. And what you wouldn't wanna do is sort of water the position down or, make it so that somebody was spread too thin. Their caseload would not be, as heavy, but it would be more intensive. And it would be, so it wouldn't be that, you know, all students at a kindergarten level would necessarily go to this person. It would be decided on a case-by-case basis, from the team meeting, process.
Is there a current need or a foreseeable need for that kind of intensive?
Yes.
Okay.
I just was thinking, when you brought up the age differential, question, I was just thinking, if you have, sometimes you have kids who aren't ready for kindergarten and they still have service needs and they're still, can be eligible to be in the preschool, the integrated preschool. So if you've got a kid who's maybe a little older, then do you have to start being careful about how you group the classes in terms of the 48 or 49 months?
Typically, we don't retain students that are identified, with special education needs. It's not typically what is done, it's more of an exception than the rule. So somebody that required additional services, I would say that they would still transition from a pre-K programming up to, a kindergarten programming.
Right, I'm just thinking if you have a kid in a community program and then they come to you saying, okay, we've identified needs, and then they qualify and then they've gotta go in a class to just.
I mean, I would never say that something is set in stone, but
How to
typically,
service them, could that lead to complications, I guess? Just a thought for down the road
Yeah.
when it gets to that point, but anyway.
Mary, could I
Carry
ask,
on.
just to make sure we have clarification, so with this recommendation, you know, we had 3 teachers, but we didn't have enough students to require the support of 3 teachers, which is why we went down to 2 teachers. And based on that population of students, 2 teachers is still the appropriate number. But this person isn't going to serve in the same way as the other 2 people who are still remaining in the building. And that's what I wanna make sure everybody understands, very, very specialized, it will be a very limited handful of students that see this person. And this person will really be exclusively for those students. I would think the best way to describe it, it's not a pull-out program, but this person will be dedicated to this finite number of students in a way that the other teachers are not.
It seemed like a highly supported program, like within the general ed.
yes.
Like,
Can I ask a question? Christine Martini. So there'll still be 2 preschool teachers in addition if you hire 1 full-time? Is that what you're saying?
The recommendations, so again, these are not this is not
No, but if you
my.
were to do that.
So the plan what she had stated was that there should be 2 preschool classrooms, not 3 preschool classrooms,
Right.
based upon the needs for special education programming. And
Not
the
two not 2 different teachers.
she's saying that we could go from 3 integrated preschool classrooms to 2 integrated preschool classrooms based upon the number of special education students that we currently have and what is projected for the remainder of this year.
I understand that, but I mean, as far as teachers, so you would fill the 2 classrooms but 1 teacher and have
We would
a
have,
morning and an afternoon session, and the same teacher would do
that seems as though that's the recommendation, so that's not So I don't want it to sound as though this is something that is sort of set in stone, or this is the way that it is moving, but her recommendation is that we reduce the 3 current preschool classrooms to 2 preschool classrooms.
I
That-
understand that. The question was, who would be teaching? There'd be one teacher doing a morning session and one doing an afternoon?
So this is the recommendation from an outside provider, so, or from somebody doing an evaluation, so she would have no information regarding, contracts or who has seniority or anything along that line. So she did this based upon the special education needs of the preschool, not based upon personnel decisions. Does that make sense?
Yes. I have a question. Well, just a comment, some of the, duties of this particular position and the coordinator's position and the team chair position overlap. So I'm sure as you dig into this, you will look at that and delineate,
Mm-hmm.
and figure out, well, maybe this person could also be the coordinator, cause the coordinator earlier could have been shared between the team chair and the director of student services, and there just seems to be some overlap. So I'm sure as you vet this,
Okay.
you'll see.
So the observation here, so observe students regularly, that wouldn't be in an EI setting or sort of outside of the building. This would be observing students that she's currently and I say she because
Yeah, whatever, yeah.
but it would be observing students that are within her caseload. So in other words, if they if there was a behavior plan and something wasn't working or something was going awry within the classroom, they would be able to go in and directly observe, make recommendations and make sort of those changes, do some reteaching and redirecting. So that observation piece would not be outside of the building. And then special education teachers training the assistants, so that would be on directly what they're working on. So ESPs should always have a special ed teacher that is their contact person. The special ed teacher would be sharing the IEP, they would be sharing the accommodations, the direct instruction that is supposed to be happening. So there always should be that professional staff person that is overseeing an ESP. And not that ESPs aren't, capable people or hold degrees, but the responsibilities of the IEP really fall on that professional special education teacher that is working with the students. So there should be direct instruction for the ESPs.
Right, I'm just suggesting, Mary, that when you vet this and come up with your own recommendations, which is what I assume you would do, you just look at how Sally identified responsibilities of some of the key people, and I'm just reading overlap.
Okay.
And that's all I'm suggesting, is that when you recommend what you think is the proper thing for our district,
Okay.
that you take that into consideration.
Sounds good.
So I think just also to help emphasize is that we had Mary come tonight to talk about the recommendations that were made in this report, and then we'll have her come back on January 6th to talk about it delineated, because clearly part of the recommendation is we have 2 morning classes, 1 afternoon. The recommendation is to go to 2 classes. The presumption is 1 would be in the morning, 1 would be in the afternoon. How many teachers do we need in that role? And if we need fewer teachers, what happens? How are those people going to be used? You can see there's not really a reduction in the need for the teachers. It's just repositioning people in order to do a better coverage of our students and make sure that there's more success with them entering the classrooms, particularly with the transitions. So absolutely to your point, Ellen, about the overlap, we have to make sure we understand and delineate where everybody is. And when Mary comes back on January 6th, we'll have that information for you in a much clearer format.
But this position here is clearly a teaching position.
Yes.
This is a focused teaching position.
Yes, this
Okay.
would be a
With-
this would be a special education teacher,
Right.
with the skill set to work with this,
With this
group of-
pre-K to
One.
grade 1 population.
Yes.
Gotcha,
Right,
but it's a
but-
teaching position.
But
It's a teaching.
it also says train assistants and teachers and modify curriculum, and so there's some overlap in terms of.
So they would be modifying curriculum for the students, so they wouldn't be developing curriculum per se, but they would be looking at the goals and objectives and the general education classroom instruction, and they would be making accommodations and modifications so the students have, access to the curriculum that's being presented.
Is that typical job description for a special ed teacher to be doing
Yes.
exactly that?
Yes.
Did, for this recommendation, did she look at data, or did she get to observe some of the kindergarten classrooms, so she could kind of see what a transition looked like and what students,
She
who
did.
say went to the kindergarten were looking like and what kind of supports they were getting?
Yes, so she was here in October, so about 4 weeks into school, and she did do an observation in, one of our kindergarten classrooms that did have a few of our friends, in the classroom, so this was based upon this was based upon an observation, and information from special education teachers and related service providers.
Okay, so she could see
and
what it looked like.
probably the building principal, yeah.
Did she meet with us?
No, she met with you.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, so I think the,
Right.
the transition was, was difficult. And I think that I feel as though this is, I thought this was a great recommendation of hers. I thought it was really,
I agree with her.
something that was needed.
I have a question.
Sure.
So is this Walker partnership, are they really a partnership with our school? Or is it kind of a one-stop recommendation to kind of go through our processes and help us develop a plan for changing what we do? Will they come back periodically and look at what changes we've made and assess how effective they've been?
If we pay them, they will come back.
Okay, but what was the intent?
So the intent.
When we had them come, other than to just come through, because they could come through and say anything, and we might not implement them.
Right. So I had never met the person that had done this evaluation, prior. I have used Walker Partnerships, before. Typically, they're people that have been either special ed directors or, specifically, worked with students, in a behavioral or social emotional need, or they have come in, as early childhood coordinators. And they take a recommendation, and this I felt was a beginning place to, begin to look at whether we needed some change. This is the draft. They will give us, additional recommendations as to sort of the process. This is also somebody that once we're starting to develop a process, I would like to continue to work with her to sort of have, sort of next steps that we are doing. And I think that it is something that as we're changing and evolving, it's always good to have somebody come in and do, an evaluation of your programming. So again, this would be something that as we put this in place, if this is a recommendation we put in place, I think that would be a good thing to revisit it again next year, to look at sort of what changes have been made, and what recommendations would she continue to, support.
And they've already come and done some work in our district once already, Jean, so they're just coming back to do another.
You mean since
Walker Partnerships.
previously or
Yes,
since
previously,
this
nothing to
was
do with
done?
the preschool, another
Okay.
facet of our students here. So we've had them here before.
Okay.
And they're premier in terms of visiting districts. There's also a retired superintendent who's in there who also was a SPED director previously. So there's a huge cohort of folks in there with a vast amount of experience who come in and help work with a very independent view in terms of they're not just taking a package and saying, oh, everybody's gonna get this particular package, but rather they're really looking at it from a fresh eye, which is hard for us to do because we're in the middle of it, so we don't see some of the nuances that they capture when they come in and look.
What was it, are they tied with the school or anything, or are they just?
No, so the Walker School is a school, but they also have a larger organization with a partnership where they do outreach to schools. They actually have, they'll go in and they'll set up programs within a school system. You can contract related service providers like, a school adjustment counselor or a social worker or something along that line. So they have different areas that they can recommend.
So this is separate from
The
them?
Walker School?
Yeah, the Arch
It's,
School is
it's
separate.
part of the same family.
Okay, that's what I was curious about.
So it's Walker Partnership provides that outreach to schools.
Okay.
They want us to design the application and screening process for peer models, so we should develop a comprehensive preschool application, which looks at sort of developmental milestones in all areas. Instead of doing just an open house for preschool in January, February, she really felt as though we should, do group screenings at that time. Well, the teachers are doing sort of these mini screenings with groups of 6 to 8 students, that the preschool coordinators should meet with parents to answer questions about the program. So sort of have the parents in one area where they would be doing an overview of what preschool looks like, and the teachers are really evaluating the students, or screening the students in the next room. For students that there are questions about with that group screening of 6 to 8, then there should be, individual screenings again set up, in the spring, and maybe even possibility, through Child Find, that you may be possibly evaluating students that you're screening as models.
So, in the past with, 3 sections, have we had screenings, or is it basically everybody that's applied has gotten into our
I
program?
think everybody that applies gets in.
No.
In the, no, but, I mean, with outside, but the screening process didn't eliminate, we didn't do a screening process.
You mean screening on
On-
typical peer?
Yes.
I was trying to figure
Don't
out
screen.
whether, it sounds like what she was recommending was a screening process for peers to make sure that when we're creating this balanced classroom of 49, 50, not the 50, which is her
Yes.
recommendation, that there be some screening and a select group of peers identified. But I was trying to figure out whether A, a screening process has taken place in the past, and B, whether basically everybody that applied got in the last couple of years.
So I think,
Here.
previously there was a lottery, so there wasn't a screening process. So there weren't people that applied that you said you wouldn't be an appropriate peer model. I do think that it is important to, if you're looking for peer models, it really should be somebody that meets, the developmental milestones in order to be a good, peer model.
Yep.
So I think that it's really important to have a screening process and sort of the developmental milestones. I think having that group screening is really a nice process, because you really can see how children are interacting, with others. I also think it's a great way where our professionals are actually getting, eyes on a student and seeing whether or not somebody, may need to be screened for, being a special ed student. So having the speech therapist as part of that, occupational therapy, and the special ed teachers, I think that is a nice set of eyes to look at typical peers, or people that are applying, to see whether or not there may be some, challenge areas.
And it had been just a lottery prior.
Okay, so we have 24 peer students in our current cohort.
No, we could have,
We could have.
but we don't. It's, the classes are not filled.
We have how many students? We have 34 in pre-K?
Yes.
Okay, and we know that there are
Oh,
11.
11, yes.
11 spots open,
Mhm.
so sounds like our ratio right now is 10 to 24.
I think we have a lot more peer models than we have special education students.
And was there a lottery for those 24 peer models, or basically 24 people applied and 24 people got in?
That was
Yes.
a lottery.
There
There
was
was
a
a
lot,
lottery.
there was,
Yes.
last year?
How many applicants did we have, do you know?
Oh, there's still a waiting list, so I don't know, I'd have to get the number, I could get it.
I'm just curious to know, what the lottery looked like, cause I know when I looked at it way back when, the program was much, much smaller, so the lottery was serious business.
Lottery
Okay.
still is serious business.
Okay, so I'd be curious at some point, just so we understand kind of what that,
Okay,
waiting list looks like.
sounds good.
Did they have any commentary also, I mean, about that outreach we do with the preschools or whoever else we can do outreach to in terms of identifying students who might have needs that the parents might not know that there is a program that could meet the needs of their students or that kind of thing?
So child find is always important, so we should be, advertising, a couple times a year that, if somebody has, concerns, they should be reaching out to the school. EI is, a tool that we can use for that identification process. And local preschools, would be recommending, parents to, go to their local school district. So I think that there are, currently, or at least last year, the, preschool teachers would go to some of the private preschools, to just sort of do, an overview or some,
And are we allowed to do outreach to pediatricians and that kind of thing, just so they have information there? Because you have to do all
pediatrician-
those developmental checklists, and sometimes they have information on that kind of thing, and sometimes they don't.
I would think that
Because
they'd be
it's a
ruled by the
public
HIPAA laws.
service.
I don't think that they could divulge any information on children.
Pediatricians will say to
No, but
parents,
you can have like on there, you can have
Like a poster.
Yeah, or
Oh, okay.
handouts like that that say, I don't know, that that are letting parents know that these programs exist.
Okay, I thought you meant that they would actually
No,
get
no, no, no.
involved
Identify.
with weighing in. I was like, no, they can't do that.
I think most pediatricians that are, I think pediatricians are doing a pretty good job, advertising that, if you have questions at this point, you should be seeking your school district to, have your students or your children evaluated. I know that advertising, whether it's ADHD medicine or anything along that lines, is also advertising, that if you have questions or concerns, regarding your student's progress in school or, that you really should be reaching out. But I definitely think that, we should have information on our website regarding, preschool and evaluation, as well as doing outreach, regarding, child find obligations. And that's the end of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for doing this.
Does anybody have any other questions
I
that,
don't think so. We're storing them up for next time.
Basically, you're gonna take all this and look at what you already have and sort of come up with more fine-tuned sort of, this is what I think based on Walker and what we have
yes,
at the next meeting. Okay.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Mary, you have to get out of here.
MCAS decision, flee. It's an MCAS versus park decision, you could flee.
Unfortunately, I dodged that one.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you for
all.
coming.
Good night.
Thanks, Bob.
Good night, everybody.
Okay, so the next item on my list is the MCAS decision, a vote is needed. I pretty much understand where the committee has been all along with the decision to go with MCAS this spring or go with park, but it's still a legal requirement that the committee has to make a decision and make a formal vote. And I gave you some of the information that was presented to us in terms of what will be moving forward, and of course, because MCAS 2.0 will be a computerized test. I was at a meeting today with the Lighthouse superintendents and one of the representatives from Department of Elementary and Secondary Education did come. And there was a lot of conversation about how are we all gonna be up and running with our technology and will there be any money available? So I'm working with the office to see, but the timing right now is not good. They're looking to put technology grants out. I believe he said it wouldn't be till late spring 16 or early fall 17 that they would be talking about getting grants out to us, which at that point would be too late for us to participate in. But we'll see what we can do. But nonetheless, we at least now have to give a count to the department. We did do a hand raise with about 20 of us at the table as to whether districts in the South Shore were going with Park or going with MCAS. I think when they asked me MCAS, there were 9 of us. Please don't ask me which districts were the 9, but I do know Hingham was one of the districts that is definitely doing the MCAS again this spring. but I wanted to just let you know. So it was a pretty even balance between districts choosing to move on to Park and others retaining the MCAS.
Well, there's been a changeover in the board, so it's always a good thing
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
revisit. So,
And just
any
to
conversation?
Just to refresh my memory, the MCAS 2.0, the earliest that we would see it is the 17-18 year, is that
I
correct?
believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay. And in 16-17, so next school year, the goal would be for, if we stuck with MCAS would incorporate some of the Park questioning into it?
It's already going to, so for instance,
Okay.
in grades 4 and 7, they're removing the lung comp portion, but, well, they're saying they're removing the lung composition. They're not totally removing it, instead they're embedding it, so there's a difference. One of the things we heard today that I'll just share, there was a number of districts who did the Park, digitally last year, and they are moving back to paper this year.
Interesting.
Yes, and I thought that was very interesting. So, there were very few who were planning to do, all digital. I was also impressed hearing that they were things that we weren't hearing a lot of conversation about, but the performance of students who took the Park, on computers versus the students who took the Park paper and pencil, and it turned out if students were doing the digital rollout or had one-to-one going on for a good period of time, they were more successful with the Park done on computers than students who just stepped in to take it. There was also the conversation that there seemed to be a gender divide in terms of performance, that the males were not doing as well as females in the test. So they have a lot to work out, and we don't really know what the questions are going to look like yet. They're just beginning to come together as an organization. They're handpicking who they want on the committees in terms of people who've had all kinds of experiences and creating all of the questioning coming up, but that's not something we're privy to at this time. But I wanted the committee to know what we were hearing firsthand today from Desi.
And just so I'm clear, based on reading this, it looks like if you do decide to choose Park, it becomes only partial, because not all your students can actually do Park. So you'd honestly be split based on some students would be doing MCAS and some students would be doing Park. So you're a mixed district if you head in that direction.
Yes.
Yes, and
Which
the,
is
and
one
the
of the
part,
big-
the part about being held harmless if we switch to Park or not, you know, and being held harmless, there was a lot of conversation that in 3 or 4 years, will it still be held harmless a number of years out, because they're going to need to have some kind of criteria to do some comparisons, and so I certainly, based on what Louise Demas and I were listening to today, based on what the commissioner said the day it was selected, the vote was taken, the commissioner had a call-in for all of the superintendents. I would still recommend that we do one more year of the MCAS while they figure out all of the details and while we continue to move forward, getting our infrastructure in place.
Any more questions, comments?
Where my head was at.
Okay, so then we need, a motion, well, I guess we have to determine which way to go first. Unless we all kind of are feeling that we should stick with MCAS. So maybe we should have that discussion first so that we can just make one vote if it becomes appropriate. You were on the committee, Mary, the last time we voted. It was pretty clear that the rest of us felt like it was the right decision to stick with MCAS. Does anybody have any strong feelings about moving to Park?
I'm strongly against moving to Park.
I thought there were no benefits, especially if you're gonna be
If it's gonna
split
change.
between MCAS and Park.
Exactly.
It would just gonna create more comparison problems.
Okay, then that makes the motion much simpler. Okay, so could I have a motion to accept MCAS as the testing, as the test of choice in Cohasset?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? And let's do a roll call just to cover it.
I, Barbara, second.
I, Katie Dugan.
Hi, Gina Stino.
I'm Mary McGoldrick.
I, Ellen Mar.
Okay. So MCAS it is.
All right, and
For
so-
15-16.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I will, I have until Friday to put that in, but I'm not waiting until the deadline, so tomorrow I will, call it in. And we will be done, thank you very much. You also have in your packet, an extended leave of absence for your approval. I should have put a little vote in there, but I forgot to put in a votes needed.
Sure. Okay, Okay, so we have a request from, one of our teachers to extend her maternity leave for a year. And do we have any questions on that? No? Okay. So could we have a motion to accept the request by Beverly Herb to, extend her maternity leave for 1 year in accordance with Article 16, Section D of the collective bargaining agreement?
I was gonna read it all until you did that. So
I'll second.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that's approved.
So we'll let, Mrs. Herb know about that tomorrow. She is, looking forward to having the opportunity to spend some time, quality time with her students. I mean, with her children, excuse me. She'll miss her students, but spending
Okay.
some time at home. The next thing in your packet is the policy JKAA on the physical restraint of students. Last week when we met, I gave you the policy, which I said was very brief. And then I put behind it, as I said I would, all of the pieces that goes with the policy. It's not quite in the order, but it nonetheless, the top piece behind the policy, as you can see, is a potential letter to be sent to parents in the event there was a restraint. The next piece, as you can see, are the procedures. And it's very lengthy, which is why I said to you last week, I didn't want to hand it out the first read. I wanted to get the input from all the principals. There were no changes requested by the principals. They were all fine with it. And then I sent it out to you because it's pretty meaty, as you can tell. So that is the procedures that will be available for everybody, 11 pages of them.
I like this format to the extent that there are procedures that are tied to the policy for us to see both. So that was really helpful because it allowed me to kind of check off things in the policy. I could physically see them in the procedure protocols that we were covering off.
And the other thing is, I felt, as I had said to you earlier, that you should really have a copy of this. I mean, it will be attached behind it, but you should see it, because if we ever had a restraint and a parent called you and asked about it and you were, really, there's 11 pages of information, I don't want you to feel that you haven't had the tools that you need to read through. But there is a lot of meat in this. So this is the procedures that will follow, that everybody will have to adhere to in the district. The restraint log, should we ever need it, every principal has to have one in their office in a place that's confidential. And then the next piece is the actual report form that everybody would be required to fill out following a restraint if one should happen.
I have a question, Mayor. I do. So, just to clarify, this will obviously go into effect after, assuming there's no problem after we do the second read tonight.
January 1st.
Okay. And that's a legal requirement, as I understand it. So I'm assuming that the online handbooks will be changed?
That, I had a conversation with the principals about making those corrections.
And then it'll go into the policy manual. Does it need to be anywhere else?
I'm sure we'll have it on the website.
Okay.
I think it's so lengthy, and everybody, all districts are grappling it. I mean, talking to other superintendents about it, everybody has been grappling with this. The good fortune we had is that our attorneys from Lyons and Rogers really vetted this for us to make sure that we had all the pieces we needed.
Something that I think might be interesting and helpful for the community to see and for us to see too is, as we have new policies that are changed either from the state level or federal level, if we could highlight those on the website.
Sure.
There will probably be changes to some of the emergency and security policies going forward. It might just be good, much like the Association for School Committees does,
Right.
Recent changes to your policy.
Right, and I also wanted you to know, because part of the discussion, Mary didn't send it over to me, but I did go back to her after the last meeting at your request and said, they're looking to make sure everybody's trained by January. And Mary said, the list is longer than you realize of how many already are trained. So she was gonna get me the list, but she didn't get it to me for tonight, but I will make sure that you have the number of who's already trained. There's a huge number of folks that are trained, and I'm talking even ESPs and others, bus drivers, and so forth. Yeah, so we have a huge cohort.
Training is not, it's an overview training.
Right.
Right.
No, and I understand, our question was mostly surrounding the ESP training
Yep.
because
So we have new people who will be coming on, for instance, we'll have new people coming on into the kindergarten room. They would need training because they weren't here in the understanding when anything was done.
But to Mary's point also, I think I would be disturbed if I received a letter saying that my child had been restrained that day without knowing that there's a policy in place. So I think that it's important to let parents know this.
Absolutely, I'll make a note of that, and I'll work with the principals on how we get that message out.
Okay. Ellen, you have a question?
Yeah, Barbara, could you just clarify that the training is with regards to the policy and the procedure for everybody? And is everybody actually going to get trained in the physical act of how to do a physical restraint?
Not right now. We have
Ever?
to get the overview. I think that's something eventually that will happen, but
Okay.
you know there's gonna have to be fill-in. Once somebody's been trained once, they only have to do an overview after that.
Okay, I just wanted to be
Yeah.
clear that the training is about the policy and procedure.
Okay.
The training is not the physical training
Right.
of
Thank
how
you
to
for that
properly do a
clarification.
physical
Yeah.
restraint.
Right.
So I don't want everyone to think that every staff member is gonna know how to
No,
execute
no.
physical restraint.
Absolutely not, you're right,
Okay.
that is correct.
Thank you, 'cause I didn't realize that, is it okay if I?
Yes. Your name and address, please?
Yes, Kelly McGee, 112 to Review Lane. So just how this plays out, so if a child requires restraint, and the teacher's in the classroom, they have to phone somebody who is trained, and that would potentially be the principal or.
Could be the adjustment
But
counselor in
that's
the
how,
school.
is that what the procedure says, like if there's a necessity to have a child restrained because of those other things are happening, someone else is getting hurt, they injure themselves, there's that list of criteria.
Anybody that's been physically has been trained to do the physical portion would be.
But that's what has to happen, so the classroom teacher has to manage whatever physical thing is happening in the classroom to call the person. Is that feasible?
It really is, having worked in a number of schools,
Okay.
it really is,
Alright.
and what I would not want to do is have that teacher, unless it was a teacher in a specialized program, that there was a purpose that we knew that might happen. I don't necessarily want to think that the classroom teacher has to stop to physically restrain a student. We have a team of people in the school though who have been trained, and Mary Buchanan, so at the elementary level, cause I know your daughter is at the elementary level. So Mary Buchanan over the summer and Laurie Dolan came in and they targeted very specific people to do the training. I know only because I saw them coming in every day with the sneakers and the gear, and they were down here or they were upstairs. So a lot of people have had, the key people who need to be trained within the schools have been trained.
Is there a part in that, because I haven't seen the procedures, like, are the teachers then, is there a way for them to minimize, like, to get the other, if there's a situation happening that's that extreme?
Yep, and
that's in that.
so the procedures, do talk about exactly that situation where, as it reads, first a number of de-escalation techniques are tried, so while you're in those de-escalation techniques, I mean, as I kinda read the procedures, first you try de-escalation, and if that's not working, then you're clearing the classroom or trying to escort that student out of the classroom. So it's not going down necessarily in full view of
The students.
all
Wouldn't
students.
do that in front of
Yeah.
the students, unless there was immediate physical harm to other students, we might have to do something, but honestly, I think in 33 years, I've only had maybe one instance where there was concern, but I've never seen a student have to be physically restrained in front of other students, and that's not the goal. The goal would be to either hopefully have the student who might need assistance out of the room,
Yeah.
and if that's not possible, then we bring the students out of the room so that student's left in the room
Got it.
with the
That's all
appropriate
spelled out.
personnel.
It's all spelled out in the
Yeah.
procedures.
It is, and it talks about who is allowed to do the restraint in terms of being properly trained and so forth.
Interesting.
So we wouldn't just grab somebody down the hall and say, hey, can you help us? That's not going to happen.
There's key people
Yes.
identified, and that when they get this training, procedure and protocol training.
The policy says each building principal will identify staff members to serve as a school-wide resource to assist in ensuring a proper administration of physical restraint. These staff members will participate in an in-depth training program in the use of physical restraint. So it's a limited, it's a population within the building that have the actual training. Everyone is trained on the policies and procedures, and the de-escalation techniques
Any more questions?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I just, in the procedures, the only thing I wasn't sure I saw in here is that there's a reporting requirement, essentially, that, it says, it's
What
on-
page you on, Beth?
It's a good question. I'll read my numbers. It's under section, oh god. It's right before section 6, it's on the same page as section 6, but the paragraph before it, so it made section 5.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah, point 4. Sort of in the
Yep.
middle of the paragraph, it talks
Administrative
about
review.
administrative review, and in the middle of there, it says that, blah, 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 physical restraints school-wide and for individual students, the duration of restraints and the number and type of injuries, if any, resulting from the use of restraint. So it says you have to report on that, which, I don't know if this is directly tied, but I thought that as part of the procedures, if there is a restraint, that the nurse should have to do a check on the student afterwards, a body check, and that's not part of the safety requirements, additional requirements for the use of the restraint. I thought that's maybe where that would fall into the procedures, as a body check by the nurse.
Well, I think the nurse probably has been trained, but we
Right.
also have, you know that there's also a recorder, so somebody is there to
Right.
record as well, so it's not in isolation again.
Right, but that's not a nurse checking for injury, right?
But I guess I'd ask the question after the student has gone through this and gotten back to a place where they need to be.
Right. I think it's often standard procedure to
Is
do
it?
a body check after a restraint, that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
And if it's required in reporting, I think it would be something to run by the legal,
Okay.
the lawyer, I'm making a note.
It
And
isn't that the injury, if there's an injury observed, it actually is in the report
Right,
at the back.
or just if someone later says, I was injured,
Right.
then
You
the
want
nurse would say, well, I
documentation.
did a body check afterwards, cause then a parent could say, you injured my child doing this restraint.
No, it's a
Um,
very valid point.
When maybe they, twisted their ankle on their way home from school.
We'll ask.
So, and then I just thought also on the reporting page, it says date and time of parent guardian notified on the last page. I don't know if there's another part where they note the method of notification, but that might just be good to include.
Well, we have a letter here,
Right.
that's why you saw that, and that doesn't mean the letter will be kept to that wording either, but we have to have something there as an example. So
Mhm.
the letter would represent the notification in writing.
Yeah, the letter's at the beginning, right behind the policy.
Right, I think it said that they could notify the parent by letter or try to call them, so
I
it just.
think they would
for the
do both,
reporting.
to be honest with you. I would highly emphasize that they make a call and follow it up with a letter.
I thought the procedures actually were within 24 hours, call has to be made, and then within 3 working days,
Letter
the
sent.
letter has to be sent.
Right,
So
I just
there's-
thought it said within 24 hours it has to notify, so I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, and that hasn't changed.
Okay.
That was part of the old law, so that's still in place.
The only question that I had, was in the policy, it talks about, physical restraint is prohibited when medically contradicted, for asthma, seizure, other conditions. So, that was the one thing I didn't see in the procedures as to if that's been developed and who maintains that list and who has knowledge of those students.
Well, the nurse always has the list of who has what, obviously. And any student, if John was in Mrs. Smith's room and had asthma, that teacher would absolutely know.
To me, as I read this policy, there was going to be literally a list of, and maybe I was reading it wrong, but I was reading the policy to say there was going to be a list. I mean,
I wouldn't expect I wouldn't expect that whole list to go out to every single teacher. If there's teachers who don't even come near that student, again, dealing with FERPA, we're exposing students around the school to other individuals who shouldn't be aware of some medical situations, but when a student is in a classroom or in contact with certain teachers or adults, those teachers or adults would be informed.
okay. Well, what about the, school-wide resources? Should they be aware of
If they
students?
were going to be around the student, they would be aware.
So you're speaking about anyone who was trained in
Trained in
the
the whole
physical
system.
restraint?
Like,
Yeah,
we have a list.
anybody who's been trained to do the actual physical restraint will know who the students are,
Okay,
yes.
that makes sense.
Is that what you're asking? I just
Well,
wanna make sure I
I
understand.
am, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna, hypothetically,
Right.
you know, Paul has asthma.
Mhm.
Believe me, he can be physically restrained. I see him wrestle with his dad all the time in Just, but I guess what I'm questioning is there truly identification down to this level of these conditions that says if students have asthma, which is a pretty common condition,
Yeah.
physical constraint is contradicted.
Yeah, we would know. I'll just say that list would be put together, I would think it would sit in the principal's office first.
Okay.
And how we delineate some of this, and it's not to say that some of this won't need changing once it's in place, because part of it is, you know, to the best of their ability, they've done this to help us with our district, but we might find we need to do some tweaking down the road until it's been implemented. We're fortunate that there are districts where there is a common strand of this. We are not one of those districts, fortunately. So in terms of getting that information out, the appropriate parties that need to know it will know it, but it doesn't mean that there won't be circumstances where we decide we have to make some modifications.
And we have a question from the audience.
Yeah, hi, Jenny Malinowski. I guess my question ties back to what Barbara was saying, and I don't have the documents in front of me, so it might be spelled out. But I'm concerned with a nurse is doing a body check and a parent hasn't been notified. So as a parent, if nurse was, checking, doing a body check on a student, and then I wasn't notified as the parent yet, that's a little concerning to me.
Oh, the order of which it would happen,
Yeah,
you're
right,
suggesting?
if I just was finding out the letter in the mail,
I would think when you come to get your student, you would know
that the body check already happened?
that there would be one or had happened or the nurse had already seen the student.
So
Yeah.
first off, body check is not part of this currently.
Right.
Right.
It was,
Right.
it was a question that Barb had raised
Okay.
relative to
Okay,
this.
I was just
So,
curious.
no, she was raising the question as to whether that needed to be part of the procedures, but
Okay.
currently,
Currently, it's not part of
it's,
it?
it's not,
not-
not
it's
part of
not
it.
Okay,
So
alright,
if
that's
the,
clear,
if
thank you.
the
In the
physical,
procedures.
if the physical restraint happened,
Right.
the notification of parents has to happen within 24 hours, and then a letter has to go out within 3 working days.
Right.
And there's attenuate reporting associated with it.
I think what you would find that this being a very small district, first of all, I as far as any body check, I said that I would be bringing it back to legal counsel, but
Right.
this is a very small district, and I've never found an instance of any kind of discipline issue, not a restraint, but any kind of discipline issue has slipped through a day before a principal would contact a parent. I mean, it's usually same-day notification for all kinds of disciplinary action. I wouldn't think that a restraint would wait 24 hours, unless it was something extraordinary, we couldn't reach the parents.
Thank you.
Can we add that to the policy?
Add what?
That the parent will be notified immediately if physical restraint is required? Or before the end of the school day, if
I
physical
think-
restraint was required?
We could say that we'll try to notify, I think the state tells us, the time wasn't arbitrary, that was from the state, and the lawyer used the state limits.
Put that to the procedure, not the policy.
Right.
Right, because you already
Right.
have language,
No, right, I meant the procedures, sorry.
yeah.
We can add that
It's multiple documents.
Yeah.
and lengthy at that, so we could certainly put in that the expectation is it would be on the same day, except in extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah, that's
Would
fine.
that be fair enough? Would you be
That's fine.
comfortable with that?
Yep,
Okay, we'll adjust that.
okay,
Thank you.
all right. Any other questions from the school committee or comments? Okay, so, you feel we need to read it again? We read it once. I mean, we've all read it, read it.
But we had a live read last, the
Yeah.
last
Time.
meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Does
there have been
anybody
no
want a live
changes
read?
to it. Do you want us to read it? Okay,
The whole thing.
all right, I mean, we've all, no, we wouldn't read the
We
whole
wouldn't read
thing.
all the procedures.
We're just the first 2
No,
pages.
just the first
Just
2
the
pages.
policy itself, not the procedures. Okay, so if, the feeling of the committee is that we don't need to read it, physically read it at this meeting, do I have a motion to accept policy JKAA, physical restraint of students?
I'll make a motion to accept policy JKAA, physical restraint of students.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
And then this will be up under the school committee tab on the policy section of the website, okay?
Great, thank
that little bit of cleanup, and, I'll have Jennifer post it. Alright, next item is your bus maintenance update as to where we are.
Can I just ask one question about policy?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The Cory fingerprinting, is that
Mhm.
for January?
Yes.
I already got a first read done, okay.
You're early.
Great, alright.
Maybe you'll be lucky and you can read it out loud.
Yeah, it's long.
27 pages now. Not really.
Come to the party.
So the next item that's in your folder is the bus maintenance log. We do have an interview set up for tomorrow morning to speak with a mechanic. And we'll be able to report out at our next meeting on that. So we were able to arrange that finally. I also went back and took a look at, didn't put that number in my file, but I went back and took a look removed the older buses and just looked at the leased buses and how much we're spending overall, what the average is per month, and what it will come out at the end of the year if we maintain the level we're at. I have no guarantees that it will stay at this level, but if it were to maintain at the level we're at, it would come out for the 7 buses approximately. When you take out the accidents that the buses have been in, not counting those, because those are not typical or expected, would come out to about $9,600 for the whole year with the maintenance at the moment of what we've been going with rating in terms of any adding fluids, any repairs. That does not include the several accidents the buses have had, the broken branch that fell and caused damage and needed repairs. Those are things we could not have predicted. When you add those items in, obviously the rate goes up. But as far as the number of items that have to be done, if you notice, a lot of the buses haven't had anything done since September.
It's been pretty calm.
Yeah, it did raise a question, because when we were having this extended conversation over the summer, one of the recommendations that came out of that series of conversations with potential service providers was trying to group, maintenance-related work during winter break. So my question is, and we know we have January DOT inspections, correct?
Right, yes, yeah.
So, are the buses
So-
scheduled to go in during winter break so that we're ready for January DOT?
Yes, I believe they are. Well, I know we scheduled the January DOT inspection, I forget what date that is.
Okay,
But I believe the recommendation of NET
Yeah.
was to do the PM in the spring. So we did it in the summer. They're saying, once a year, or the most twice a year. So I think we're scheduled for the next PM is probably the February or April break, I believe.
I'm sorry, with a PM.
Preventative maintenance, I'm sorry, yeah, so that's the oil change and all the fluid checks and greasing and so forth.
You'll have buses in service during winter break.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, we do, for
Yeah,
athletics,
for athletics, yeah.
No, the thought was that you just had a bit more time if you needed to
Yeah.
get major
Right,
service done.
right.
So are there any buses that we're specifically targeting to get in over winter break to address issues? I guess what I'm focused on is that we did a really great job over the summer of getting all the buses in to make sure that they were in tip-top for the August DOT. I don't see that plan in place for January right now.
We are gonna have NET come down beforehand to check all the buses before the
Okay.
inspection.
All right.
So whatever's needed at that time, will be done. And then they will be here for inspection. And I believe the inspection is, split in two times during that time, so that we don't have.
Theoretically should be cold, but we'll see.
Well, it'll probably be cold, I would say,
It'll be
yeah.
colder,
Yeah.
at the very least.
And then just one thing we added, on this month is the bus coordinator hours.
Mhm.
I don't know if you saw that on the first page. On the top, just the hours that she spends, trying to coordinate the bus, repairs and so forth. And some of the repairs that she's doing on her own. Like, not just repairs, but,
The
and
DEF.
DEF
Yeah,
fluid
fluid.
or.
Yeah, I saw the purchase of $1,000 of DEF fluid, or
Oh, by the
$500.
pound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The other thing I did was, knowing that winter was coming, I did put a call into Cummins in the event the engines needed work. And, they're right in Dedham, so if we should have any problems, we can have, instead of going all the way up to Tingsboro to NET, Cummins will be able to take the work on themselves in Dedham, which is a lot closer. So.
So, I did some rough math, just looking at the numbers, and we have 5,500 budgeted for our sped transportation maintenance, and we're currently at 4,500, so we're basically at our sped
Right.
vehicles
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
And that just goes to show that the older the vehicle,
more
the
you-
higher the
Well,
maintenance cost.
we having issues with that one wheelchair.
Right, so I
The
feel like,
wheelchair van.
I feel like we're obviously going to be short on our sped maintenance, number. On the regular fleet of buses, plus the minibus, we had 31,500, and we're at 20,500 right now, so got 11,000 to go in the budget. My feeling was that just based on where we're headed, we're probably $15,000 short in terms of maintenance. Does that jive with your forecast numbers?
Yeah, I've gotta go back and look at
Okay.
that forecast number, but it probably is about right, I think.
I think it'd be helpful just next time, we get together and look at this
Yep.
maintenance report, if you could, reflect based on your most current forecast,
So we
where
can
you
relate
think,
it to.
where you think this is gonna land,
Yeah.
in terms of, or what you have in the forecast for total expenses. 'Cause I know what's budgeted, and I know we're short. I know that in the forecast that you've been working on, you have assumed that we are going to be short and put some money to cover that, but,
Yes,
I'd love.
I forget what that number is.
No, that's
I'll
fine,
look at
I
it.
was doing my own math, so
Yeah.
that's dangerous, so I'd like to hear what you have to say.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I had a question. Dave, when you commented that you put in the bus coordinator hours on the
Yes.
top of page one, it's monetized.
Yeah.
Is that over and above her contracted salary? Or is that just?
Some of it can be, she's an hourly employee.
Okay.
So it just depends on, if she's dropping off a bus in the evening, or picking up a bus in the evening, like in Marshfield from Steve's Equipment, that could be, that's beyond her day, that could be an overtime hour.
Okay.
It just depends on when the things happen.
Okay, because when we get to the monthly recap, this is probably gonna be one we're gonna wanna see a forecast on
Yeah, yeah.
also.
Yeah, we're
For the
trying
end
to
of the year.
keep an eye on it, but
Okay.
we just never know from day to day how that's gonna work.
And then the only other question that I had, based on this report, was the status of bus 90739 that, looked like it had been in, I believe, an accident and was out as of
Most recent.
12/4. Is that
Yeah.
back?
It's not back yet, no. I know the insurance company just recently looked at it, last week, so I'm not sure. I don't think they even started repairing it, until after that. So I haven't received an update on that.
Okay.
For our insurance claims, is it per bus or, for the, like,
It's per accident.
deductible?
Per accident, there is a
okay.
deductible.
Okay, gotcha.
And it was disappointing, cause 90739 had 0 days out of service.
I know,
Now-
it's a happy little bus.
It was a happy little bus until it got in the accident.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, based on mileage, do you think we're okay on our leased buses in terms of not going over mileage for the year, or are we kind of?
I do, and, we'll start mixing them around, more. I mean, we have 15,000 miles per year on each bus, and I think we'll be okay.
I was wondering if we could negotiate with NET to dismiss all the towing miles as not being included into it. But,
Yeah,
um,
transportation back and
907
forth up
grace
there.
and
grace
there.
period for that.
Well, we'll start
You're at
moving them around,
12,000.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some that have pretty low mileage and others that
Right, right.
And
are
And
getting
there,
close.
some of the,
Slots and different numbers on those buses.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The drivers have their favorite buses too, it's like they don't
Yeah,
like to
right.
change.
No.
And some of the drivers do more like athletics than other drivers, so
So
that
what
could
that
be
is.
a reason
that-
for
yeah.
90733.
We gotta
That
start
bus
doing-
picked
We'll have
up
to
2,000
Yeah, we're
miles
gonna have
in
to
a
switch
month.
that
Yeah,
around, yeah.
we'll have to switch that one
Start
out.
doing some moving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Put a nice cozy seat cover on one of the other buses, so.
And refresh my number, bus 74470, is that the oldest bus in our fleet?
Is that the 2010?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
it is, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's one of the owned buses.
That's one of the owned buses.
Yes.
Holding a very special place in our heart this year.
Yeah, it's a, just,
Yeah, pouch written in front of it, that
Yeah.
page.
it's an expensive little bus, yes.
300 miles of it's driven this month.
Okay.
Okay?
And we
Yep.
thought that was gonna be a bus to keep.
All right, the next item is the fiscal 17 budget review. It's a preliminary review of our operating budget, and Dave and I are gonna take that on together.
Actually, it's a preview.
Yes, it's a
First-
preview.
Yeah,
It's a,
almost like a trailer preview.
like a holiday, it's a holiday, it's not
Press
Star
trailer.
Wars.
It's a holiday.
Movie trailer.
So the goal today is just to stay at a very high level, correct?
Yes.
No, I'm saying that for myself, so you guys can keep me in check, but also for the audience, so that they know that more is coming. This is just, and this is new for the school committee to actually have a preview in December. Normally, we'd be getting our first look in January.
First meeting in January.
And the thought process is now that we have some sense of where the town is landing, let's see where the schools are coming in.
So, right, this is the first time, it's on the schedule.
Yep.
The calendar that the school committee voted, in September. It's one of our many presentations, I guess, that we will have. So it's just, I guess, a preview. The first slide actually shows what the school committee voted as their budget priorities for FY17. And we try to base our budget requests on all this, so that we kind of flow through what the priorities are and so forth. I don't know if you wanna go through all of them, we can kind of touch on a few of them. As you know, our budgets are site-based budgets, so they're actually built from the individual schools, from the ground up. We start our budgets at 0 each year, and we figure out what our needs are, where all the staffing is placed on the salary schedules, where they'll be placed on the salary schedules, what column, what step and so forth. So we don't take our salaries and just put an increase in that. We actually look at each individual personnel and find out where they'll be for next year on the schedules that we have. One of your priorities is to encourage the administration to seek and secure all possible sources of funds, which we do. As you know, we work with PSO, CEF, athletic boosters are great sources of funds for us. We appreciate all of that. Also, I believe Deer Hill just applied for a competitive grant for safe and supportive schools, but we don't know if we've received that or not, but we know in the past competitive grants have been tough for Cohasset to get, but we try. We also develop enrollment projections to determine, class sizes and resources of what we need per class, and we have a slide on that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Promote academic achievement by staying current in curriculum, technology based on data gathering through assessments. As you know, we use Atlas curriculum mapping, where we map our curriculum through the grade level and beyond the grade level, so that all teachers can discuss what the needs are for curriculum. And we also have a full calendar of assessments of when these assessments are done, which ones and so forth. Supporting the district-wide social emotional initiatives that began in 2016. So I think part of that is, again, the training of teachers for PBIS, and now looking at this Walker Partnership Report, we may encompass some of that information for our social emotional initiatives.
Yeah, and at the high school, the community care survey and how that's playing out in
Yeah.
terms of incremental programming.
Yes, yeah, good point, yeah. Again, we adjust the delivery of in-district special ed services based on recommendations. That again would be, again, the Walker Partnership, for instance, looking at those recommendations. Benchmark and adjust fee schedules periodically to support the delivery of services of students in the community. So we've met as a budget subcommittee the past couple of weeks to look at fee schedules. I think we have that on the agenda tonight about our building utilization fee. And I know we did look at preschool tuition fees, and I think we decided to hold back on that for a while. So those are things that we look at together. Again, looking at projections and other key information provided by administration to estimate future budget needs. And I think with the school committee attending our administrative leadership council meetings, I think that's a good way for us to discuss our future budget needs. And I think that continuing that will help us make some decisions that we need to along the way. Again, that's part of the next item too. Leverage the strategic planning process underway in FY 2016. Again, working with the leadership team and school councils, and also have an involvement in our strategic planning process, and all that working together, I think, helps us with our goals and getting there. Continue supporting the One Community initiative with the town to collaborate and utilize economy of scale opportunities such as technology and security. I know that we're working with the police department on security and town-wide initiatives for technology. The capital budget committee is helping us achieve those goals, and I think working with all town departments helps the schools and so forth. So we're gonna continue to work on those goals. Again, work with the town manager and town committees, again, done the same thing to advocate for resources for our schools. That I think is part of us meeting with the fiscal forum that the town manager puts forth. With all of us there, we kinda have a say of what's going on with town fiscal policies, and we have input with that, which is also helping us, I think, moving forward. And the last thing on your budget priorities is the review of year-end fiscal balances with school committee. So, as you know, the end of April, beginning of May, we'll bring forward our forecast of where we think we'll end up in June at the end of the fiscal year, with some ideas of how to use those funds and allow the school committee to either make recommendations or vote on that, or decide whether those funds should revert back to the town or not. So that will be something new, I think, this year that we're working on. That doesn't come to the end of the year though.
Praying for balances.
That's right. We always pray for the positive balances. So this slide just shows, I think you've all seen this before, our long-term enrollment history. So as of 12/16 for this FY16, current class size, we're showing 1647 total pre-K to grade 12 students. Yes.
So, you know that there is a discrepancy with the state, and I did finally get through to them to uncertify our number once again, and we're now, the differential's down to 8 students.
So it's going to take the next week or two, literally going through the list one more time to find who those 8 students are. But that's a far cry from when they had us at 1588 in September.
So this is the number we have in our student database.
Yeah.
At grade level, right now. So it's showing, an increase of 41 students over FY 15 to this year. I think prior to the last 10 years, we've had an increase of about 132 students overall, for the prior 10 years. I don't know if you have any questions on this at all?
No.
No. Next slide is, where we currently are for our FY 16 student enrollment and our projections for FY 17.
And these projected
So-
classes are based on recommendations from the building principals at this point? Is that correct?
For next year.
Yes, for
Yes,
next year.
yeah.
Okay.
What we actually do is look at the prior 5 years and, average out the changes. So for kindergarten next year, we're projecting 105 students, which is three less than what we have this year.
I mean, I looked at the 20-year average, and it's 108 is our 20-year average.
Overall, yeah,
So,
yeah.
so it's close in terms of the
It's
number.
I mean, we go back usually 5 years, not the full 20, but, you know, I think it gives us a more recent number. And then, next year, grade 1, we're projecting 117. So that's about 9 students more than what we have in kindergarten this year.
And just to clarify, you presented this once at fiscal forecasting, but when you developed the forecast, you looked at 5 years of data in terms of the average
Yes.
additions of students from K to 1, and the
Yep.
answer was 9.
Right.
And so that
And
was, that's what you're projecting.
That's
So
what
you-
we're projecting,
You
yes.
projected increases from K to 5, decreases based on that 5-year history, 6 to, I think, 11, and then 12 remained flat, right? Something like that?
Yes, yeah, so I mean, we can go through them all
Yep.
if you'd like. So overall, we're expecting a 22 student decrease at Osgood School. This does not include, pre-K, by the way, preschool,
Yep.
in these projections.
So you have the large larger grade 2 class rolling into 3rd grade.
Right, so in grade 3, we are projecting 144
Yep.
students. Looking back over the last 5 years, there's an increase on average of 5 students.
Yep.
And then the same with grade 4, we're projecting 135, and again, that was a 5-student increase average from the prior 5 years. Grade 5, we're projecting 127, because when we look back at the 5 years average, it's really only 1 student increase.
And I like this methodology better than what we did last year, which was basically just hold the
Just hold that number.
hold the
bring it
number
over.
flat, because
Right.
that has not been our history. Our history
really
has
hasn't, no.
been increases,
Yeah.
and it's hard to put a pinpoint as to where the new enrollments
I
are gonna
think
come,
this
but
gives us
being
a
silent,
closer,
being
yeah.
silent on it was not the right answer.
Yeah, and I think this gives us a closer idea of
Yep.
really what's gonna go on.
Yep.
So at Deer Hill overall, we're projecting a 9-student increase
Yep.
from grades 3 to 5. And then in middle school, we're projecting 139 in grade 6 for next year. So on average, we lose about 2 students in that grade over the prior 5 years. Grade 7, we're projecting 139 also. On average, we've been losing 3 students per year on the average of 5 years. And then in grade 8, we're projecting 143, and we also lose 2 students on average. So overall, we think we're gonna lose 1 student in middle school overall.
I do have one thought, and it was prompted when I looked at some of the older budget books.
Yeah.
So looking back at budget books from like 2010 or
Yeah.
fiscal 11, they actually had the section numbers for grades 6, 7, and 8, so you could calculate kind of an average academic
Did we do that?
class. Yeah.
We did that.
You
at
did
that
that,
time. Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at that.
You armed me with that.
I did,
I just, again, when we're trying to have the conversation
Yes.
about class size,
So I can add that again.
I do think that middle school, it was as simple as, at least for the academic courses,
The core courses,
the core
I think you're
courses,
right,
and
the
I
math
don't wanna,
and English and
the
right.
specialists are a more complicated
Right,
conversation.
right, right.
But for that,
I know, I would love to see
Yeah,
class
I can do
size
that.
here.
Yeah.
So for the January 6th meeting,
Okay.
we'll change that.
that'd be great.
Yeah, I think
Um,
maybe along the way, we just forgot that we had done that.
Well, I bumped into it recently. And then, for the high school, how much work is it, and it probably is a lot, for Carolyn to
Yeah,
look at
I-
the class sizes again,
Yeah.
the section sizes?
It's very tricky.
Yeah,
I mean, you can
I've
be
asked
given
her
an
to
average
do
and
that,
just,
but-
for instance, it might be 28 students in a room, or it might be 23 students in a room, but the fluctuation can be really great depending on what section, and you might have 14 students in one section, but because of how the order of what students are taking, you might have 29 in the next section. So a teacher might have 50 students overall, but they might not be in a 25-25 arrangement.
But also because of the way the block schedule runs,
Right. Yeah.
there are certain times of the year when students have electives that they only take for a quarter. And then the numbers,
Right.
so the numbers kind of ebb and flow in
Yeah.
a very large way.
No, and I remember that, cause I did look at I mean, she was to get to the high school numbers, she had to do kind of a couple page analysis
Right.
by
Right.
content area. I think where it was helpful last year was when she was advocating for those additional 0.5 resources in mathematics and science. It became very clear why there was the need when she did the
Right.
section analysis, so maybe, and again, I don't know what she's advocating for, but if she is advocating for incremental resources, I think she needs to be able to substantiate it with section analysis in those content areas to back it up.
We have it.
Yeah, we can have her look at that.
Again, it doesn't have to redo the whole thing, but again, if you're gonna come asking for incremental resources,
Yeah.
show me how it's short,
Mhm.
based on your projections.
Okay.
Is it helpful for us to know sort of outlier numbers, like in certain, like just you have certain classes that have over, 32 students in it, or certain classes
At
that-
certain times of the year, again,
Oh,
because
just
of block
goes
scheduling,
to-
there are times of
okay.
the year when, for example, electives, band, okay? One semester, it's not a semester, one term, they have to take phys ed, so, because it's a requirement. So, the music class, it's difficult to
Okay.
explain. The music classes kind of expand hugely
Right.
the next term when that required health class goes away. So it's just, and I don't know that it's health per se,
So the
but
only
there are,
consistency is maybe language and AP classes then?
that what?
The only consistencies throughout the year are your APs and your language right now? Is that?
Your
okay?
AP
No,
Yeah,
language,
your AP
runs all year.
runs all year.
Right, so
Language
that would be a
doesn't.
consistent size that
Yes.
wouldn't
Right.
change?
Yeah,
Right.
So
but
that's really
Not
the
the
only
language.
measurable.
not
aspect.
language,
Not language is still semester based?
Yeah.
yes.
Is that changing, by the way, or no?
Not unless we,
Not right now.
Not unless we
No.
add staff on.
well, there is a way to change it, but,
Okay.
But it also depends upon what the kids subscribe, when they do their scheduling and what a teacher can accommodate. If there's an elective that's popular and kids wanna take and the teacher can handle 30 kids
Right.
physically and educationally, they'll take 30 kids as opposed to, not 4 kids getting bumped out because the class size says it should be 26.
Right.
At the high school, it comes down to really the load levels of the teachers are the driving force
Mhm.
instead of the class sizes factor into it, but the teaching loads are the more important factor at the high school level.
It's also sometimes safety just to understand, so, there's certain OSHA rules we have to follow in lab sciences. We're only allowed or permitted to have so many students and so in a class, and how many students can be at a lab station at a time. I'm sure that we wouldn't have 40 kids in Ala Fontaine's class with all of the saws and the equipment and so forth.
so we have to think about, you know, where those numbers are, but, so there are certain stipulations we have in the courses by virtue of what the courses are.
Have you seen the analysis that Carolyn did last year?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'll dig it out and I'll get it to you, cause it was, at least it'll baseline you on last year, how varied it was.
Okay, yeah. Read that along with the block schedule.
Perfect.
So grade 9, we're projecting 120 students. On average, we lose about 15 students a year to area high schools, like private high schools.
Mm-hmm.
And then grade 10, we're projecting 115 students. We lose about 2 students a year in that grade. And then grade 11, projecting 100 students, and we've added in the last 5 years on average 2, plus 2. And then grade 12, over 5 years we don't add or subtract. It's usually pretty stable.
Last year we added
Yeah.
a couple.
Mm-hmm.
Should move in senior year.
Right. So overall, the whole district-wide, not including pre-K, we're projecting 6 students less next year.
I mean, we are also aware that there's a lot of building going on, but we really have to base it on the last 5 years. Not guessing where the housing market is.
Good question.
Just a clarification.
Yes.
So you said, for instance, the projection for kindergarten next year, 105, is based on the previous 5 years?
Yes.
Because I think
So-
the numbers from the previous slide are right, the average should be closer to 113. So I just wanna make sure I was understanding where the
So what we
projections are.
do is we take what we have this year, and then it's the change over the last 5 years. So it's not the total
Oh,
of
okay,
each
so
class
grade
over
is the
5
percent.
years, it's the difference of the classes in between years.
Interesting.
So we're using that 108 for this year as our base, and then we look at the change from the last 5 years of what happened.
The change what's the
From year to
deviation?
year, from year to year.
From what you projected to what is
No, from the
actual?
actuals, from the last 5-year actuals,
Yeah.
well, how they changed from
So
year
you're
to year.
taking the average deviation based on this is the baseline
Right,
year.
yeah, yeah.
So the 108 is your baseline, and then over the past 5 years, the
Yeah.
average deviation from 108
Yes.
we're estimating.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
No, we told them to take that out there.
Next slide, just shows our FY
Can I just make
17.
can I make a quick comment on that kindergarten thing? Cause I'm
Yeah.
just looking at the K long-term enrollment history, and in the last 10 years, 2006 to 2016, out of those 10 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are larger than 100 and 105. Then for those 7, you've got 140, 109, 136, 129, 123, 119, and 130. So I'm just thinking, like, that's a sort of interesting point when you look at those differences. Like, that's a pretty big swing. So it's like, plus 35, plus 3, plus 30, plus 20-something, plus, 19. Like, I don't know, it's just
And this is where
be a big difference.
there is literally no data. I mean, the town
Right.
census unfortunately is
Yes.
grossly
We don't have it to
inaccurate. I mean, if you
use,
look at
yeah.
the town
Yeah.
census data for children under 18, what the town census data reports, we have them all in school currently. So we're off by order of magnitude on town census data. And then if you go to preschools and try and collect preschools, we've gone that route before. And unfortunately, you're missing people that are using daycare as an option.
In their workplace.
In their workplace, and so, this has been the struggle to project, until we start to get registrations in. And I know that the letter, the registration or notification generally starts in January,
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
Well,
And
this
so-
isn't the time or place for it, but
So,
you know, like,
so
June
we've
1st
tried, so
to register?
there has
do.
been, there is a deadline, and there has been, in the past,
Parents have not abided by the deadline.
Deadline.
Since I got.
So there are no consequences then if the
No,
deadline
right.
is I mean, the consequences to our kids this year, right?
The consequences have been, just so you know, the consequences have been in the past, we might have not had a half day opening, if parents have requested a half day opening. That's one of the biggest
But
consequences.
found full day.
And so they would have to go, they either have to accept full day or go elsewhere. So that's the biggest consequence, but you would be surprised, and I don't wanna say, oh, it's only kindergarten, because honestly, you know, we instituted deadlines for bus registrations, and I can tell you 2 days before school open, how many parents are running in with the bus registrations, and it makes it very, very hard to plan routes, and we're changing things at the last minute, so, I mean, we obviously wanna be polite, in no way do we choose to be rude, but it is very hard, and, one of the things we discussed in detail last year was the fact that I took the census, and I went and compared it against the list of registered children, and saw how many children were within the age bracket of potential students who weren't in our district. Maybe they're being held one more year, maybe they're going to private school, maybe parents have made other arrangements, but we have that, and then at the same time, we have students who register who aren't on the census at all.
This is a Cohasset specific census.
Yes, every town has to do a census.
you'll get it in January.
Yeah.
Please fill it out.
No, that's what I
Well, that's
when you
it.
say census, I'm thinking
It
of
would
a
make
larger-
our
Please
work
list your
easier
children.
if we could help parents to understand the importance of filling out the census, but we also know that legally, we can't make parents fill out the census. Or even if they fill it out and say, yes, I do live at such and such a road, they don't have to identify they have any children in the house. I mean, it's very open.
Yeah, I know, I can imagine how difficult it is. I think when you look at, say, the incoming fourth grade, is it? I mean, you're up at 24 already, that's pretty high, so there's not a lot of wiggle room.
Third grade, coming third grade.
Well, it's the third, oh yeah, the
Yeah.
third grade, I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of the chart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
there isn't.
I'm just, I just.
We're keeping everything in that way, but you're right.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I know the question is, why is it we don't always know the numbers? Well, truthfully, we don't know the numbers because parents aren't registering without a deadline. If we had a deadline and said, you know, May 1st, and that's it, your child can't ever come here, that also isn't fair.
It's also,
And we
we're a
don't
public
wanna
school.
do that.
No,
No,
exactly. So we can, this year,
we can't move it late. Right, so there's a whole series, and I know in other towns, at least in the town I'm in, they told me they literally send people out knocking on doors and families to try to figure it out. We don't have that kind of manpower here, so we have tried to do the best we could. We've sent out, there's some things in the newspaper, we have sent out, Blackboard Connects here, but if you are a parent who hasn't brought a child into the schools yet, our Blackboard messages will serve you no purpose whatsoever. So each year, we try to find novel ways to find everybody, knock on a neighbor's door, make sure there's no child there. Anything we can to try to get as accurate, we've actually gotten better than when I first came.
I think what's gotten helpful is we've started, I think we have more, data on, at this date we have this, at this date we have this, so we can sort of also track year by year, cause that wasn't happening before, like how many are getting added in this month, how many are getting added in this month, so we can start using that information as well, cause I think, 2 or 3 years ago that wasn't getting tracked.
Yes.
Again, this might not be the proper place for this, Amanda's on for April, so. But that incoming third grade class of 24, when all of the rest of the grades from K to 6 are the lower, average class size, it's just gonna be something to think about, cause even if you had a 7th class, you would still be only bringing the average down to what 4th and 5th grade are, in terms of students per class.
But then
We have 7 now. Did that class, I mean, I know it's a larger group size, but it's just something to think about.
We have looked at historic ranges, for K to 5th over the last 10 years, and the class size of 139, while large, is not the largest. We had a number of classes go through Deer Hill recently that were ranging anywhere from 145 up to 153. And so the average class sizes, were ranging anywhere from 23 to 24 So it's an excellent question. We've historically operated in ranges, when having conversations. And, you know, the ranges for Deer Hill have typically been 23 to 26. And that's what's in the teacher's contract. And so when we look at those, again, ranges, we look at historical averages in terms of what's been the max, what's been the min. You know, the max that's been in third grade has been 24.5. So it does vary. It does vary.
I think it's an interesting conversation to have though, and just looking at looking at what our class size averages are through our elementary, because from research I did do, for several comparable districts, your average K to 5 class size was 19.73, so that's K to 5. And for 1, 2, including us, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 districts, your averages in grade 3 was 20.1, grade 4 was 21 point basically 0, and grade 5 was 19.4. So it's interesting to consider, you know, just what our targets are, or what we want to see as class sizes for our district. K to 5.
All set?
Yep.
Okay, so this, next slide, shows our FY '17 forecast, request. At this point in time, this is just a preliminary, as we said. So for FY '17, our request is $18,451,207, and that's an increase, of 5.41% over FY '16. So, yeah.
So $946,000 more.
946,207, an increase over FY '16.
I did just note, and I don't honor our agreement that I'm not gonna jump into detail tonight, but I did note that there were.
Did you just say you're not going to honor?
No, I am going to honor, but
You're going back on your word now.
I'm going to just flag for you 3 that caught my eye. You know, utilities decreasing,
Yeah.
sped transportation decreasing, and contract cleaning and supplies decreasing, year over year. So I generally expect everything to go up. I was pleasantly surprised, but wanted to understand more
Yeah,
about how we were able to achieve savings, some bigger, some less in those accounts,
Yeah.
but for another day.
Yeah, and we again will look at all that, you know, we constantly look and make sure that we're doing this as accurately as we can.
The one that.
With utilities, prices have come down,
Yeah,
and I
Thank
think
goodness.
we're basing that on the lower prices. You know, you just hope that the next year they won't go up, but
Yeah.
you know, you base it on what you know at the time.
the special ed transportation was the one that kinda concerned me, just given how unfortunately our transportation budgets have been trending. They have not been trending down.
Yeah.
But we were under budgeted this year, so I was concerned that we had enough cushion in there, given the age of our vehicles, to really sustain a decrease.
I think it's more on the contract service side
Okay,
that we probably saving a little bit
Okay.
of funding.
I'm happy to
You know,
take the good news.
And it depends where the students will be next year and so forth,
So that's based more on where out-of-district placements might be in the
Yes.
transportation.
Yeah.
but-
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So the next slide is actually the town manager forecast on 12/3. He presented this to the fiscal forum group. And it's a 5-year forecast, and for FY '17, you know, just to highlight the important piece for us, I guess, is He's projecting an increase for the schools of 479,828.
But we need not over
And
900.
we need
Yeah.
900
Need over
points.
900,000.
You need to go to the next page with the meals tax.
Yes.
So we'll be short, if that's an accurate forecast, we'll be short about 466,000.
That does not include adding any teachers in at the elementary level right now.
Right.
It's just based on what we have.
Yeah, so he actually put forth two forecasts, this one,
Put forth a pro forma.
a pro forma, we can call it a pro forma.
And I think he seriously is calling it pro forma
Yeah.
because the hotel and meals tax has not
Right,
passed, and we
which is
can't
this
count
next
on that
slide.
income until it
Yeah.
passes at
At town meeting, right, it has a
Right.
long way to
So
go.
it has a
So
long way to go.
he's actually forecasting $300,000 for, meals and motel tax as revenue. But as Katie said, there's a lot of steps in between to get to
Absolutely.
that point. And it doesn't mean that we would see any of that increase, because it could go to OPEB or other areas that are in need too.
He's put it in.
Stabilization.
But he's put it in.
He's put it in.
Well,
Yeah.
he's put it into schools.
Yeah, he has at this point.
So the important thing to note too is that I know from past history, I wasn't here for the other times it's come forward and not passed, with the thought that I think residents might think, you know, oh, I don't wanna have to be paying that meal tax, but when we go to Hingham, we're paying the meal tax for Hingham.
And Situate.
And Situate, and wherever else we haul, wherever they all
Right,
have meal
and
tax.
I think we've also done a lot of research on the average addition of money to your check at the end of the meal is somewhere around 75 cents.
Right.
It's not like it's hundreds of dollars that you're paying, or even $5 or more that you're paying to cover the meal tax. It's 75 cents. And it could help the town hugely.
Yep.
So,
And the single biggest number that Christine, your town manager, has yet to finalize is that health insurance number line 912.
Right.
And he will, I believe he's meeting with Maya
That's coming up.
in January, and based on that, he'll have updated rates,
Yeah.
and so he's promising a reforecast in February.
Right.
914.
Um,
914.
On line,
Line 914.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, 912 is workers'
914, no,
compensation.
914, you're right.
Yeah. So he's also budgeting that in a different way this year too,
Yeah.
that each individual person that has the health insurance and so forth.
He's done a bottoms up.
Right.
Jean, I have a question.
Yes.
Barbara, you said that this forecast doesn't account for any new positions?
No, at the elementary level, in terms of the numbers that you saw, because I know there's some discussion about the numbers. If we were to have to add an extra teacher
I think she's
in
talking classroom.
classroom
teachers.
wise.
Right, okay, because I would assume, because it's built bottom up, if Mr. LeCount anticipated that he needed an additional classroom teacher, he would have put that in his
Yes, yeah,
requisition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
correct, yeah.
And that holds true for every building principal,
Yes.
where they
Yes,
felt
yeah,
that they
yeah,
needed to add
yeah.
staff
Yes.
or, yeah, okay. So that's all part of this.
That's all part of this,
Okay.
yeah. And, also that 18,451,207 includes all our offsets.
Okay.
So we've already taken off the circuit breaker offset, we've already taken off the athletic,
Okay.
revenues offset,
So, it does say.
user fees and so forth.
It does say that the forecast includes new staffing. Can you just give
Yeah.
us a number in terms of a FTE number that's including?
I can give you it's not, I don't believe there's any classroom teacher requests.
Okay.
Some of it is, like our occupational therapists moving it from a 0.6 to a 0.8,
Okay.
say at middle school.
So sped staffing levels may.
Yeah, or the
be-
math, we have the math specialist at Deer Hill and Osgood, so moving that position from 0.6 to a 1.0.
Okay.
That we split, so it would be a 0.5 at each school instead of a 0.3 at each school. That type of thing. I know, high school was asking for one ESP, to travel from, I guess, classroom to classroom. And then, the occupational therapist at Deer Hill, again, from 0.5 to 0.6, so that type of thing.
Okay.
But, classroom teachers, they haven't, I mean, except for the math, I guess, well, that's specials.
And she's not a classroom teacher.
Yeah,
She's not a classroom
there really hasn't been any,
Specialist.
there hasn't been any requests for classroom teachers.
Okay.
So we'll get detail on that at the next meeting then?
Yes, yeah.
January
Yeah.
20th?
The 20th.
Well, and also on the fifth,
Yeah.
we usually go through and let you know what's been added, difference from last year to this year.
So, kind of more detail on the 6th, and then the building principals will, I guess on the 6th,
Yeah.
Mary Buchanan coming in and exploring further the budget recommendations for SPED specifically.
Yeah.
And we'll get a
Yeah.
bit more detail on the overall budget, and then on the 20th, we will see all the building principals in
Correct.
for a line item
Line item,
review of
yeah,
what their
right,
requests look
review.
like.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and
Okay.
it's important to note that when, Mary got the Walker Partnership report, we had already pretty much constructed the foundation of this, so we didn't have any of those recommendations at the time, so it's pertinent that we start to parse out everything.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just the last slide is our budget calendar, as you know, so our next meeting is, again, January 6th.
Has advisory said anything about their process this year, in terms of what they're reviewing?
No, not yet.
I haven't heard
They
anything.
just had a reorganization.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, we'll,
Be curious to know if they're gonna do it differently.
it'd be nice if they didn't have the meetings on Wednesday, so I could go. They used to go to them. So hopefully we'll get to do some of that during the budget process. Okay, may I ask for a 3-minute recess?
No.
I can't.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes.
Oh, did he good, good.
So the
Oh, thanks,
difference
yeah, yeah. No, he
about,
loves it.
so I look at, so from K to, right, I look at, say, the difference between what K was and what one is. So that's where I'm, yeah, so from grade level, so, where they go from the.
So you're looking at the average.
Thank you, thanks very much.
One over the last 5 years.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what you're,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
all right. You said
That's-
average deviation.
Yeah,
And I was like,
average,
okay.
okay, in other
next
I'll let you
item on
know.
the agenda?
Warrant.
Great, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is finance, and it would be the warrant 1612S.
So
Do you have
we're
anything to
requesting-
add?
We're just requesting this school committee to vote, the warrant, and as usual, Mrs. Estino was looking at the bills, has approved all of them, and
What do you need? Yes. Okay, and I have looked over everything. Do I have a motion to approve warrant 16-12S?
I'll make a motion to approve warrant 16-12S.
And do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor, roll call please.
Barbara Steffen.
Aye, Kitty Dugan.
Aye, Gina Stino.
I'm Mary McGoldrick.
I abstain, Ellen Mar.
next item on the agenda is the monthly update as of 11/30/2015. We've expended about 31.3% of the budget. We're still looking at things like unemployment and it's gonna be, like we just got the bill, I think, chainsaw.
I saw it.
How much, I forget what it was, $9,000, I think.
Yes, it's.
And that was a December bill, so it's not reflected
Right.
in this report because it came in after. So we know we're gonna be over.
We're gonna
but
be over on unemployment,
We're just
definitely.
hoping that it's not gonna be
But in
higher
your-
than we forecast.
Okay, cause that's,
That's one of
the other point was that in your forecast,
Yeah.
you've been adjusting
Yes, yeah.
to reflect higher than
Reflect that
50,000
higher.
budgeted.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Can I just make a couple of comments?
Certainly.
On the first page. So the percent of expended budget compared to last year is actually a point lower,
Mhm.
which is good, and it's being driven by salaries and special ed transportation, are lower than they were last year, and I think when, we roll into the second half of the year, the salary line is probably gonna go up. Because if you look at all the other line items, without those two, we're at 40% 40.7% compared to 30%. So I'm a little concerned that a lot of these line items are overspending early.
I think, with the salaries, this year our first salary pay for the teachers was September.
Right.
Right.
So I think that's why it's lower this year at the
Often
beginning.
that first one, it happens
Because last year,
before,
the
it
first
happened
one,
in
I think,
August.
was in August, or the end of August maybe, so
Right,
there
but
may have been,
when we get to the second half though.
so it'll catch
Right.
up
It,
eventually.
that's,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's gonna make it looks, the bottom line looks good now.
Yeah.
And that's my point, is that when the salaries catch up in the second half of the year, I'm just concerned that all of the other items are overspending.
Oh, I mean, we look
Oh,
at
I
this
see what
all
you're
the
saying.
time, I mean, there,
If you
There-
take salaries and special ed
Right.
transportation out, we're at 40.7% of the budget through November, through 3 months, compared to 30% on those same things last year. That's all I'm saying, is it just seems,
Yeah.
and you can look at some of the things that are excessively high. 81% on contracted services so far this year, compared to 55. 62% on other, it's not big dollars, but.
I think, in some of those, under contract services, some things like legal is driving that, where, like our legal expense, we know we're gonna be over because of
In a
negotiations.
contract year.
So that would drive that percentage up, so it's certain pockets within the budget that would affect things, do you know what I mean?
We
I
had
don't
a
know if
lot-
that answers the
We
question,
had a lot of
but-
contracted work
I
with
guess I go back to,
And
it's gonna be helpful to do an updated forecast.
Yes.
Once the contract settles
that's
and we
kind of
can-
what I've been waiting for,
Right.
is to have that
Once the contract
settled
settles and
so
we
that
can
I
really
know,
put out
then I
that
can know
salary number.
where we are, right.
I think that F6 or F7 forecast, depending on when we settle, is gonna be very, very important.
Yeah.
First we were
I don't mean
at
to laugh.
F1,
No, but
F2.
that's really what I've been waiting for, is that contract to get
I
into
hear
place
you,
so that
I hear you,
we
Ellen.
really have a good picture of where we are.
Yeah, cause it's $395,000 more spent on
think, also with special ed tuition, I think we spent more in, circuit breaker than we did in the budget at the beginning of the year last year. But I think this year we're kind of spending equally, both equally. So if you looked at circuit breaker last year as compared to this year, what was expended, you'll see that that was, expended less.
It was 11.2 as a percent last November versus 27% this year, so it's definitely lower.
Yeah, but it makes up the difference on the circuit breaker side.
Well, and a lot of that, in terms of the contract service number, a lot of that is taken up by line 32, which was, we spent over $113,000 before we hired the help desk and the
Yes, yeah,
data.
yeah, that,
So now,
that
and
also,
those salaries weren't
under
gone down.
technology, right.
So, now we'll just roll over into the other money.
Okay. But-
Yeah,
well,
that would
I'm
drive
just
it
saying
also.
that
You're
it's,
concerned.
it's a concern, 40%
Yeah.
expended, it's kind of a concern, 3 months into the year.
Well, six months and,
Yeah,
Well,
start July
this is
1st.
July
yeah,
1
but-
to November
Sorry.
30th, yeah.
no,
Not 6 months, but 5 months.
Well, we still, the bottom line is we have to watch it
Yeah.
Yes.
and make sure that it doesn't
Yep.
go crazy.
so,
I don't know how we would fix it if it
No.
does go crazy.
I have a question about line item 6 on page 2. So, there's nothing budgeted, but the maintenance of buildings and grounds, what was that in?
A lot of that is maintenance of buildings, like telephone repair or intercom repair. Right, we don't budget each year
Okay.
for that because it's a town
Maintenance
So is
is
that
something
something that we
requirement,
get?
but it's something that the town doesn't usually cover. It's things that the town won't cover.
Okay, but you don't put a placeholder in there for,
we haven't.
We haven't in the past, no.
Okay.
No.
Do you know why it would be so much more than last year at this time? We were at $3,800 last year.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look and see what happened. I know a lot of the scheduling, the bell scheduling and the phone had to be worked on at the high school. But I'd have to go back and actually look at the detail to see what drives that.
Any question, Katie?
Yeah, I had just a couple of questions, and some of them are just me getting familiar with what's monthly versus what's quarterly. So on the tuition.
And some things are front-loaded.
Yeah.
So some things get paid very soon after the start of the school year,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you have to kind of figure all that out.
So on line 27,
one of the
on the
contracts, yeah.
out-of-district tuitions,
Yep.
we went from last month's report at $1,500 to now 200,000, 30.
Because now the bills are coming in because we prepaid 3 months last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why.
That's the prepay and.
So the prepay, when we prepay, you don't see a lot of the bills come in at the beginning of the year, cause we prepaid 3
Gotcha.
months of the
Okay.
year. So now they're all starting to come in.
for the first time.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. The other question
Well,
that I
monthly they
had
come in.
was
yeah.
the jump in therapeutic, and contract services on line 22.
Yeah.
It went up $20,000 in a month, from $36,000 in October to $55,000.
That is to do with, something we had to implement for a student.
Okay.
And that's as far as I can say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. On the next page, just going back to the concern expressed by Mary about help desk.
Yeah.
I'm now blending lines 31 and 32.
Yeah, so am I.
But if you blend them, we're at $114,000 expended versus appropriated budget of $86,000. So we're at a blended of 60%
Yeah.
expended. I guess I really, in our next forecast, wanna dig into where we're at in terms of IT in our
Yeah.
forecast, because
Oh.
that doesn't feel like it's gonna end well.
It isn't gonna end well.
Okay.
I know we're gonna be over, but a lot of the items in IT are paid at the beginning of the year, like our Blackboard contract.
So in contract, and so some of those are in contract services.
Right.
In line 32, so it's
Okay.
not as bad as, I think it's not all salaries. Cause what I was worried was that when
No,
I was,
there's no salaries under contract services.
but there was when we were using outside vendors,
No, we're
correct?
still using that one outside vendor.
Yeah.
It's not a salary because he's not an
He's not an
employee.
employee.
So
Right.
he would.
He's in line 32, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he's a contract
But
service.
before Bart was hired, we
Yeah.
were basically putting all of our expenses through
In
line
that
line
Right,
32.
right, yeah,
Now,
yeah.
now we're starting to expend out of line 31 with Bart and, the help desk person on board, correct?
Yes, but in this report, we still have that contract service on board.
Yeah, Bart
No,
is
it's
not
not.
line
It's-
31.
it's-
Line
it's-
31 is in
Bart is on
Bart's
the
out of
town
the
side.
town.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Because
Bart's out of the
that
town,
was
I'm
the
sorry,
beginning.
this
So
is
we're,
the,
so make
for
sure
us,
you-
it's the,
no, I'm
it's
sorry,
the
I
help
forgot
desk,
that.
it's the help desk and
The help desk hire that's a physical person, right?
Right,
Mhm.
yes, yeah.
But we still, in
Yeah.
addition to that person, we have a contract services,
Yeah.
of incremental.
There's some
Through,
overlap right
through
now.
December,
Okay.
yeah. So we also hired the database person too, just recently.
I'm not sure this is what
The other question I had was about water bills, because on
Yep.
all three schools,
Yeah, leaky toilet somewhere.
the water bill hits apparently, cause we were spending, it went from, at Osgood, expended 3,700 in one month to 8,700, so 5,000 there, 6,000 at Deer Hill, and a whopping $11,000. Is that a quarterly thing that hits, or?
We get quarterly
Yeah,
bills,
it's
but,
just like your home bill.
but
Okay.
sometimes the
Same time.
periods change too, so we really don't know until the bill comes in what period it covers.
Okay,
But they're quarterly, basically.
But
okay.
it's not a
Some-
consistent 3-month period necessarily, or?
Well, sometimes they're actual reads and sometimes they're not
They're
actual.
estimated,
So they're
estimated versus actual.
And I think they make it up at another time.
Cause it's huge, we're 63% expended in water against the budget this year compared, in all three buildings, compared to
Yeah.
33% last year.
That's what I was
Yeah.
getting at, is that if I'm not gonna see another jump for 4 months, I'm good, or better. But if I see, I guess what I was trying to get at is, on this year-to-date expended, given that it's billing quarterly,
But
what are we?
our first quarter of the year is always high because it's the fields that are included. You know, the Deer Hill Osgood field, the front field here, and it's all the watering. So then the bill goes down like the third and the fourth quarter because we're not doing any outside water.
So there's a little bit of home ownership, common sense that.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's really, they're
Okay.
really front loaded, you know, you're gonna get the higher bills at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
But then why wouldn't we have had it at the beginning of last year? You don't know?
I don't know.
I guess on water, is there a way of being able to tell us what months have been billed and what were still
Yes.
outstanding?
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that would be helpful. The other one that jumped out to me was the jump in cleaning and contract services at the middle high school. Last month it was at $64,000, and this month it's at $96,000. So we had a $30,000 jump on line 75.
And I'm not sure if we had, if one bill was late coming in.
They may have combined.
We may have paid 2 bills at one time, I'd have to look at that also.
Okay.
You know, 2 monthly bills at one time.
I just, we've been having this conversation about supplies and the fact that a number of the supply accounts are front-loaded by design, where they're
Yeah.
pre-purchasing before the schools. And we saw Deer Hill and Osgood absolutely do that because their custodial and cleaning supplies are at like 89% of budget.
Right,
Or 80% of budget. And the high school had been running much lower, and it just jumped $30,000 in a month. So, did the high school not pre-purchase like Deer Hill and Osgood did? It was just, again, I'm trying to figure out the
I don't think any of us pre-purchased last year. I don't think any of the schools pre-purchased.
No, I didn't mean
Not
purchase, I meant
last year,
front
no,
load,
they
like
didn't.
Well, they usually buy at the beginning of the year to stock up, and then, you know, it settles down a little bit, but I'm just wondering if it's the contract, the cleaning contract that we have with the high school.
Okay.
We may have been billed twice in 1 month, I have to go back and
Okay.
look at that.
That was a big jump on a
Yeah.
item like that. I think that was all that I had.
I guess, I struggle with the, inconsistencies from year to year in terms of, you know, last year, and if you look at all three buildings with the custodial cleaning supplies, you know, that Katie was just discussing, it didn't appear we pre-purchased things because we were 38% expended at this point in time, and now we're 55 because we pre-purchased, and the water is
Oh, we didn't pre-purchase this year.
We front loaded.
So that's why it's high this year compared to last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
But,
so-
but in everything we go through, it's very
Yeah.
hard to look at it and look at it on a year-to-year comparison, because there's caveats, there's changes every year
Yeah.
in how we do things. And I think it's gotta be incredibly hard then for you to forecast.
No, not really,
You don't?
I mean, I think.
No?
The
I
end of the
don't know, I
year
just
number
think
seems to keep us steady from year to year. There's not been any, like, except for maybe snow. There's some years we don't know about the snow, but sometimes when we get to the end of the year, we find the numbers are a lot steadier from year over year. And that's why it's,
Yeah.
you have a better
So
sense
the
of
variations month to
predictability.
month, year over year, you're not as concerned about because at the end of the year, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, I mean, there always is bumps in the road, that,
Yeah.
you know, expenses that you don't expect, like in special ed and so forth.
Right,
But,
right.
you know, you
Cleaning supplies.
track that as you go. And if you know about it, then you can track it and see where you're gonna end up.
So I think what, I would get more comfort once the contract settles and really maybe going
Yeah.
through a detailed forecast conversation so that we really peel back the layer in terms of, year-to-date expended and how you're thinking about the second half forecast,
Yeah.
in terms of where we're gonna land.
Yes, I mean, that's really kind of what I'm waiting for, is that contract to get in place.
So,
I tried to ask again today, but I didn't get an answer yet.
So I know January's packed, but to the extent that it settles quickly, I think I would feel more comfortable if we were able to do a forecast review, probably not on the 20th, but maybe on February 3rd. That's kind of the latest that I would feel comfortable holding off.
Well, it just depends on when the contract is in, sort of in place, cause I have.
No, I hear you, I'm still, January's the month, man.
Yeah, okay.
Alright. So Barbara, can you note tentatively for February 3rd? Alright, thank you.
And Ellen's putting it in that to-do list, I can tell. She's getting it on there.
So not the 20th now, we'll look February 3rd?
The
that's
20th is
something
gonna be the building principal review, which generally goes on for a couple hours.
Okay.
So my guess is that,
And that's all FY17, so we're talking now about kind of recalculating where we are for
FY16.
FY16,
Yep,
to really see where we're gonna land out.
thank you.
are there any other questions? Nope.
Oh, next item on the agenda, building utilization fee schedule.
You thought you were done,
So-
didn't you?
Yeah, you did. That's okay.
It's the building utilization. So we, met as a finance budget subcommittee,
Had a great time.
had a great time. And we took a look at, Norwell and Hingham fees and so forth, and the items highlighted in yellow are what, the subcommittee has recommended that we change moving forward.
So I'm just gonna give a quick background for people that might be still up and watching and listening. So Katie and I took a look at, just the fee schedule, particularly the turf field, and looked at some other districts, Norwell, Hingham specifically, to see what their rental fees were for their turf field use, obviously, and if there were other charges, and there were some other things that came up in terms of, aligning field charge and things like that, that we weren't getting reimbursed for, that the district was assuming on their own. So that's the backdrop, this nice new fee schedule.
And we also, we looked at this schedule and, the thought process really behind just focusing in on alumni field in particular was that the goal is to set up a new cost center in our revolving accounts so that we capture turf field replacement. And again, if you look at the fees generated in fiscal 15, it was a whopping $6,700, so it's not a lot of money that's being generated from our turf field use, in part because our athletic teams are using them so consistently. It's very hard to find actually hours when they are available to rent, because the first priority is our students and athletic use. But we know that come 3-4 years, we're going to be facing the turf field replacement. And so it's going to be a combination of funds from capital, hopefully funds from the CPC, along with any contributions from the schools. And so the goal is to begin to set aside some money to address this, so that when that day does come, and we need to replace the turf field, which is going to be, $500,000 capital investment, that there's something there. So the cost center is a piece of it. And we did look at the different fee structures. I think the one that we focus the most on is what we call Category 3, which is the non-school organization. So again, we're not looking to make money from the school activities or the nonprofit school organizations, like any of the booster clubs. So we've upped the fees as it relates to Category 3 from an hourly game rate on turf field from $50 to $100, and a daily rate from $300 to $500 that is more in line with Norwell or Hingham. One of the big observations that we had about reviewing other policies was that at least one of them actually had a surcharge for all groups around replacement fee, like for the building replacement fund. So we have added in this concept of an annual fee for alumni field replacement of $50. So it's a flat charge for all organizations that use our fields. So that would apply to our booster clubs. It would apply to the Category 3 for-profits, but everybody would be kicking in something on an annual basis to go towards the turf. The other observation that we had, and it came from Ron Ford, the athletic director, was that we haven't been recouping the money associated with relining the fields. So when Cohasset Field Hockey Club or the lacrosse clubs use our fields in the spring over at Deer Hill, and we have to reline them, we've been paying for that out of the school budget. So we've added in a lining charge on a weekly basis of $75. So basically every time they mow, they have to reline the fields, and it's $50 of paint, and it's 2 hours of a third party. We have a guy who lines our field, and we haven't been recouping that. And so the thought process was we should at least be recouping the lining fees, and that was a concept that we did borrow from one of the benchmark districts that we've looked at. So really building a replacement fund for alumni field, upping the for-profit rates to what is market, and then making sure that we recoup the lining fees that have been that we've been paying out of the school budget.
I have a question. So on the lining fees,
Yep.
so in Category 3, so if someone's gonna run a private soccer camp at Deer Hill for 1 week, then they would pay the 1 week
Yep.
$75 charge.
Yep.
If they're gonna run for 2, they pay $150.
Yep.
And they would pay, or if they were gonna use alumni for 2 weeks, they pay a flat $50 fee, and then the $100 hourly fee,
Yep, exactly,
or the 500 daily rate.
yes, depending on what organization you are.
And I do have a question for the committee too. I added in category 1, the annual fee for alumni replacement, but I wasn't sure if that's, if you wanna charge a fee to say somebody like Relay for Life that uses alumni field.
I actually don't think they use it anymore.
They don't.
They
haven't
don't.
been.
They don't, well,
They can't-
oh, they use the track, I think. They don't.
Yeah, they can't put their tents and things on the turf.
Can't put the
Right.
tents on,
Right,
but
they
they can
can.
use it, I don't know if they use it for anything else.
I think the conversation we had about category 1 and the alumni replacement was more along the lines of the suggested donation.
Yeah.
So we have it in our fee schedule. I don't know if that's too gray for you, Dave. Again,
So should I reword that there as a suggested?
Instead of annual fee,
So
have it be
suggested
suggested
donation?
donation?
I actually don't know of that list of.
I know, the
groups.
only one I
Is
could
it?
think of is the Relay for Life.
I don't know that there's any crossover here.
There isn't. I would just take it off.
why don't we just
Okay.
take it off
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
category
Yeah,
1
okay.
and so a future committee is not scratching their heads.
Yeah. Okay, 'cause I was thinking that too, remove it.
So is it a relatively easy thing to set up a new cost center in the revolving accounts, Dave?
No, not at all, I'm
Okay.
in the process of doing that now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you dollar, well, you don't know in category 3, like who's going to use the fields.
Right.
Well, I
just
mean,
have
we
last year's
go by
data.
from
Right.
last year.
Right, so did you dollar out what it might add?
So last year, the total for FY15 was $6,700. And then in 16 to date, we have $2,700 in alumni field use fees. We didn't dollarize out the $50 charges for all the organizations. And Ellen,
So
it
what
wasn't getting to a very big number, and there wasn't a way to make it a very big number
No.
without getting out of market, so
I think your field mining charge though is gonna end up being a couple $1,000s by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Because
it's
it's everything at Milliken as well, with the exception of the soccer club, because they do their own mining.
Everything in so the school lines, Milliken, because the
Well,
high school
yeah.
teams
Yeah.
use it.
If we're paying for the lining, then we will charge them.
Yeah.
I mean, not our own schools.
Right. But the soccer club, the lacrosse,
lacrosse,
all that stuff.
feel lucky.
And I'll have to probably rely on Lauren to let me know about that too.
Fees collected.
Lining fees.
Pardon?
Yes.
Are these fees collected through the summer months as well, like things and activities that happen in the summer?
Yeah,
Yep.
depends on what
Yeah.
activity, yeah.
Yep.
So if it's a rec activity, we don't collect a fee for rec department.
There's no rental.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
They're category 1A.
Yeah,
So
they're
I think-
I
category
was
one.
wondering where.
The fee schedule is online, I believe.
It is, yeah,
Yeah.
so
So
we'll,
the fee schedule's online, so we've been talking about 3 different categories. They're school-based, they're school-related, nonprofit, and then there's outside organizations, so you could go on and take a peek.
so we'll update off the online schedule.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, I was also planning on, contacting everybody in categories 2 and 3 that use the field, so they have an update of,
Mhm.
of new charges.
Thank you, 'cause I
That's
think, I think the people will wanna know about the lining charges.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So we want this to stop as of tonight, is that correct?
Yep, definitely.
So we need to vote on this, I would assume.
Yep,
Yeah.
we do. And it involves money, so it involves a roll call.
Yeah, I
Or
think.
do you wanna wait until,
No, I think it's fine, I was just thinking, I mean, I don't know how much usage alumni field is gonna get, or the fields that are gonna be lined are gonna get between now and the springtime, so.
well, right, not
Clubs
much,
can,
yeah.
can budget and plan.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it would be
For the
better to
spring.
put it in place now, particularly since Dave's gonna inform them, so that they can plan.
Mhm.
Right.
Ray, we're going, it will go through the whole winter.
Right.
Really.
Right, so, but, just for clarification, you said we don't charge the rec department, but they're in category 2, non-sponsored events. So, and I don't see them,
No, rec departments is category
Right here,
one.
1A.
Yeah, what would that be, a recreation department, non-sponsored event?
Well,
Can we see?
I'm trying to think of what it was before.
Is it a third
I
party
don't-
that
I'm sorry,
rec
I
is
don't
bringing,
Party,
is
I
it a
believe,
a third party that rec is bringing in?
Has used it before. I mean, everything that's rec department is sponsored by rec, and they wouldn't charge, we wouldn't charge a rec department.
Non-sponsored event.
I don't know if that's come across
oh, it's
lately.
1A over here.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't remember what that is because it's been so long.
Well, you have a lot of
It's all-
duplication in basketball.
It's all rec department. If it's rec department, they're in category 1.
1A.
Can we figure out what that means and maybe bring this back to the next meeting?
You mean the recreation department,
Yeah,
non-sponsored?
non-sponsored events, just to kind of
Just can't
clarify that
remember
for us,
how it
since
goes.
recreation is in 1A.
Okay.
I think if it's a question of a category that hasn't been used or we don't know what it is,
I don't
let's
think it's
just
been
cross it
used.
off.
Strike it.
Yeah.
Just strike it.
Just take it out.
Yeah, maybe we can just take it out. I'm good with that. Since recreation department's captured in a different section.
I don't remember what that is. I'm trying to think of what that is. I don't think we've ever used that.
Let's do this, why don't you, there's no urgency
No.
between
Right.
now
No,
versus
that's what I'm saying.
January
We can bring
6th.
it back.
So why don't you bring it back really quickly now that we've
Yeah.
had a chance to discuss it, and if you do find, again, this is where this was put together.
This was actually reviewed in 2012, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
12
So it's
done.
days in 2012.
relatively recent,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the,
I think Jean was on that committee.
I was.
Weren't you?
I was.
But it's actually a nice clean break then too, because it could go into effect January 2016.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can just start it then.
Yeah, okay. Alright, so we'll go back and look that up.
Yeah, so
and
just
clarify.
adjust that one in category 1, take out the alumni replacement.
Yeah,
Okay, and then figure out what this recreation department non-sponsored events is. It appears from category 1A that recreation department sponsored events using rec department paid staff. So if there's a rec department event that doesn't use rec department paid staff, I don't know what that would be.
well, rec
We have
brings
some-
in people like all the time that
but
are
we
not.
don't charge rec for anything,
Yeah, but
even
that's
if,
the point.
even
Okay,
if,
yeah.
So,
I mean, we haven't charged rec for, if they decide to bring in someone that, more professional type of person to do a soccer game or
Yeah.
something, we don't, and it's rec sponsored, we don't charge them. Cause the rec is obviously taken in a fee,
right,
So
from those
that's the
students.
only they're the only entity that charges a fee that doesn't get paid, cause all category 2, all those entities charge fees to
Mhm.
participate, so that's why
Well-
they're not exempt.
can you clarify
The
another item?
rec department does charge a fee to their participants.
That's what I'm
but-
saying, they charge a fee to their
Yes,
participants, but
yeah.
they're in category 1A,
Right,
and all the other
right.
clubs charge a fee as well, and they're in
Yeah.
category 2.
Yes, yeah.
Is that just 'cause it's a town?
It's a
And-
town,
and-
that's how it was decided way back, because rec is part of the town.
Right.
And it's usually town children that take advantage of the rec department,
Right.
things that go on. Yeah, so-
You know where I'm going with this, Dan.
Yeah. That's-
You've worked with this for a long time. No, I'll just, full disclosure, I have always had an issue that the booster clubs that support the high school athletic programs get charged a fee to use the facilities. I can see them paying for the janitors, but to be charged and then to be asked to pay for an extra coach, or be asked to help out with uniforms, or to be asked to do things is, I have
I know you have,
I'm pretty consistent on that.
yeah.
this year, so far, we've had nothing coming through for you, but folks to vote on from the booster, so we have to presume nothing has been given this fall whatsoever. So
Don't
we'll
presume that,
No,
nothing
don't
has
presume
ever
that.
been presented by,
Right.
to
We've
the school
asked.
committee for 5 years
We have
that I've
asked
been coming here.
repeatedly, so as long as we're not getting anything, we have to work on that assumption, so they're not audited.
Ron only takes money for assistant coaches and uniforms. He doesn't.
Coming through to you.
Well, we talked about that in
Yeah.
July. It's on the follow-up list, and, basketball does $20,000 a year to the high school program.
So he should be asked to present that.
He has been.
I know, I think he is working on it.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay, so
No,
we'll
So we're
step
gonna
this
put
back.
this on the
understand.
agenda for the next
We
meeting.
hear your frustration.
Okay, so January 6th. Okay, school committee comments and communication. Is the next section. Does anybody have any reports?
I have a couple.
Okay.
You wanna start with Kate and go down the line?
Sure.
All right, so Safe Harbor, I did attend the Safe Harbor meeting on the 9th. The next Safe Harbor meeting is on the 13th of, January. Because of the executive session, I showed up, a little bit late, but what Safe Harbor has done this past meeting and the meeting before it appears to be they're working with a facilitator to develop a series of goals and objectives for Safe Harbor Coalition and for our community related to drug and alcohol abuse. And they're in the process of applying for the Drug Free Communities Grant, which is a 5-year grant, which could, if we receive it, total $625,000. There were 2 specific things that came up related to the schools, and literally when I walked in, it was like a barrage of questions, and then Barbara arrived a couple minutes after me. 2 important things that I thought the committee needed to know. One is there was a lot of concern that the Community That Cares survey has not been communicated more broadly to parents and the community. I did let them know that when we first saw the survey in June, that the goal was to have Torrance Sweeney and others at the high school begin to, as they were going to in the their school improvement plan, begin to put in place a program to address some of the issues that survey came out, and that because of the work to rule situation, we hadn't been able to hear a report back from Torrance and others around that. So I said the plan was to have Torrance in, and the reason we haven't published it more broadly is just the fact that we wanted to pair the combination of here's the problem and here are some of the solutions that are being put in place. But there was quite a vocal group that was saying now is the time to get there. And I think, is Torrance coming in on the January 6th?
He came to see me today. That has been the plan all along, but apparently this year they posted all of the wrestling matches on Wednesdays the entire winter. So we're trying to figure out how to do this. I only learned that last week, so he came down to see me today so we can figure out how to make that presentation happen.
So he was working in conjunction with Brian Scott, though, was he not? Could Brian present?
Well, that's what we're working on.
Yeah.
So I know he came today, but I wasn't here at the time, so I'm sure he'll be back tomorrow.
Anyway, I wanted to relay that the Safe Harbor Coalition, given that they paid for half of it, would like to be more public with the results, which
Right.
is fine, but, so if we can get Brian Scott to come in,
Yep.
Torrance,
They are aware that we've asked for that. I've talked to
and
both
I'm
of
sure
them.
when we show back up on the 13th, that's gonna be a repeated question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Will communication be sent out to parents about that, cause I know parents are very interested in hearing those results. So will communication come out from the school committee or from Barbara, that's gonna be happening, so parents will know to attend?
Thank you.
We can do that on a blackboard.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So you'd like us to post that particular, or broadcast that particular agenda item?
I think so, yes, please.
Okay, all right. The other thing that came up, and again, I walked into this discussion, was that there was a great discussion going on about revising the school alcohol use policy. And I raised my hand and I said, we have a subcommittee that handles all policies.
Thanks
that-
a lot.
But it was taken in the context of, other safe harbor coalitions that have recently kind of come to life in Situate and Hingham. One of the things that they've looked at is the school alcohol use policy, but before Safe Harbor took over revising our policy for us, I suggested they coordinate with
That
our
would be a
policy
nice thing.
subcommittee, but it's on the list. So those were really the two quick updates, that came from that.
Katie?
Yeah.
Revising it in what way?
It was a very large, we didn't get
Yeah.
into that detail of discussion as to how they wanted to revise it. They were really,
Do
they
you think they've actually read it?
Yeah.
no
That's
one,
my-
no one,
that's
so
what-
here's.
where you're going to?
Yeah, that's where I'm going with it.
No
Yeah.
one has read it in the room. It's the facilitator, one of the facilitator's comments and input was what other coalitions have been doing, and so she threw out revising the student alcohol use, and she has no knowledge of what we have or don't have in this community, which is why I just wanted, why I red flagged it
We have
as.
the same thing that 47 other communities
Right,
have.
and I
right?
wouldn't wanna do anything until we sat down with
Right.
Carolyn and
Yeah.
And
the
again,
police and the
I
whole-
flag it only because
And the MIA.
Yeah, it's got a lot of overlap.
the group was running fast. I tried to throw down a speed bump,
Thank you.
Which one would that be?
So, the other thing that, I wanted to, just quickly update you on, finance subcommittee, is gonna meet on Friday just to look at the bus lease numbers and make sure that we, begin to think about, whether the $75,000 that capital budget, committed to last year is the right number for next year, so we're gonna begin to work through the formula that they used on the make whole to figure out what we think our make whole looks like this year
Okay.
based on maintenance. And then the last update I had, was around, the Deer Hill School Council. Just one of the comments, or several comments around security was that, parents would welcome kind of periodic updates on where the subcommittee's work is, and so if that can be just kind of a thought bubble, that going forward, even if it's a short update saying, we've begun work on the hot wash, or we're beginning work on the task force, that would be welcome, so that people kind of know where we are in the process. And then the only other, I just one quick comment, capital budget is meeting tonight, or has met most likely, and they were reviewing IT requests for fiscal 17.
Not school-based, it was the infrastructure town-wide that they were looking at, so we did not need to be at the table. I had a conversation directly with Capital and directly with Chris.
But that fiber loop that's on the capital request, doesn't that impact or benefit us?
Everybody benefits.
Everybody benefits from that, and and they're presumably we're also discussing about the telecom upgrade, which we
Yep.
benefit from.
Everybody, yes.
Okay, so there were pieces of it.
We do that.
Yes.
Do a couple of
Okay.
those.
Can't
I just
change it.
wanted to make sure that if it was something, I still think I will reach out to Sam and see if I can get a copy of the presentation and, circulate it to the group, just for our information, but if it wasn't anything specific to
No,
schools.
I said to Chris, we were concerned that things were being scheduled simultaneously, and he said the schools did not need to be present tonight.
Okay,
I figure he must know.
okay. That was it.
So, I was not able to attend the most recent leadership meeting, and Barbara could update us on whatever, the conversation was around just where we are with the strategic plan, where you are with the strategic plan. But I'll just do a quick, I did go to the digital learning, committee meeting on Monday, which was, another great conversation. There were 18 people there, teachers, admins, some community members. We're still working on the vision statement. Louise has given us a lot of homework. And, so we are working on that. There was an update from Bart, and I specifically asked Louise where we would be in terms of the rollout K through 5 compared to our timeline, which was January, and not too far off is the answer. So I think definitely we could do something. It sounds like I brought up, do you think it's feasible, for example, after we come back from the February vacation? And I thought that was a doable timeline. Definitely want to make sure that teachers have the devices in their hands for a while to work with them for the students.
They're on order,
Yeah.
literally. The student devices are on order? No, the teacher, okay. We're hoping to have some in this week.
So that was good. We had a great luncheon with CPAC on Monday. Mary came and just kind of gave a little bit of a preview of what she talked about tonight.
Can I ask you how you're funding the teacher devices? Because that wasn't part of what we requested from capital budget.
I am not sure, I
Okay.
can't tell you what line item they took it from
Okay.
right now, I
'Cause
have to ask.
The way the plan was built was that the resources requested from capital budget were specifically the carts or the iPads. I know we're talking about the laptop carts, cause the iPads are pretty well distributed amongst the teachers, so I don't think they have any concerns about how do I use an iPad in my classroom, since most of them already have access to one or access to carts with that. I think it more comes down to Chromebooks. But there was no budget for Chromebooks for teachers. All the budget was for the carts.
Yeah, I'm not sure what, I'll have to get that honestly,
Okay.
cause it happened while I know it was all worked on while I wasn't here, cause I missed the digital learning committee, cause I was with the
Okay.
commissioner instead. So I'm not quite sure, excuse me, which line item it's coming out of, but I can get that for you. But we also had a discussion, when, Ron, Bart and I sat the other day with Brian Post and Sam Wakeman and
Yeah.
talked about the cost of the Chromebooks have come down with increased, productivity.
So it's probably in there, because we had a pretty hefty number
We did.
in for the
It's
laptops.
almost in half of that number.
Okay, so maybe the answer is that based on what we had used as a budget number, I think we'd used $364 as our laptop price, which we knew was generous because we didn't know exactly what model, so perhaps with prices coming down, they can afford to get 12, we're talking about really 12 Chromebooks, probably.
I think it's a little more. I think it's a little bit more, but I'll find out tomorrow when I come back
Okay.
in.
Cause the only grades that we're gonna be using the Chromebooks were 4 and 5, so I was thinking those 12 teachers, but if they're expanding beyond that, because I think that grade 3 might be using them periodically.
I'll check.
Okay.
So, and I got the notes from Brian about the strategic plan, but I
Yeah.
wasn't there, so.
I wasn't either.
Oh, excellent.
They had to do it without me.
I know that one of the things that Brian did, just according to his minutes, was at the prior leadership meeting that I was able to go to, the teachers all the administration rather, kind of ranked their hot button items, is that a fair way to say it?
Yep.
And then weighed those results against some of the community results from the survey. So he consolidated that list, and then there are definitely some action items going forward. Are we reviewing kind of where we are with the strategic plan at one of the January meetings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and so right now, just so you know, Brian has a number of items that he has done with me. He'll be reaching out to students soon to conduct some focus groups and get their feedback. Although he says it's done, see attached, it's not attached on mine. And I'll be looking to coordinate the focus groups for the town, officials, parents, community members and so forth after the vacation break, and we'll be putting something in an update in the Mariner.
Okay, great.
So it's a number of other things here. Our next meeting is on January 5th. So,
And then Ellen and I met as a security subcommittee, and she's gonna do that.
Yep. So, Mary, Barbara, and I met on December 8th, and we put together, Mary pulled all the policies relating to safety, security, and Barbara provided all the protocols, and we talked about, how we wanted this to look, what we wanted to put together, and then Mary and I met with Sergeant Lopes and Lieutenant Lennon on was it just yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah, just yesterday, and, who had been on vacation, and that's why it has taken some time, and so we put together a binder for him that had everything from our policies that talked about safety, security, emergency management plans, crisis plans, the visitor protocols, the visitor policies, all the email communications, and he's going to do his, hot wash of the security issues from October, and we're shooting to have that done by January 15th. He has another vacation period coming up, so he's kind of out of the loop a little bit. And he'll be able to provide an executive summary for public consumption, and then more detail for executive session on what he thinks of what happened and how we can prevent it from happening again. You know, he's going to look at our chain of command communications on when there's an incident. He's going to look at our policies, see if there's any redundancies, and he's going to look at our crisis plan, our emergency management plan, and we got another plan, see if there are redundancies in our plans and should there just be one, and to make sure that all of the language from our student handbooks, our policies, and our protocols all communicate the same message to parents and are consistent. And so after that's completed at the end of January, the task force will begin, will assemble, and will begin the complete security assessment of the Cohasset Public School District.
So he did think that we would be able to report out on January 20th.
Oh, great.
At that meeting
Yep.
regarding the hot wash, that was a very
Excellent.
realistic date.
And I'll be going Friday morning to the emergency management meeting, town meeting, that they have at the basement of the Deer Hill.
Oh, was that one of the, that was one of the ones that you signed up for, wasn't it?
Yes, oh, yeah. Yeah.
Way to go.
Yay.
Yay.
Yeah, so that's at 8:30.
I'll just add that the Deer Hill School Council finally met last week for the first time. So that was exciting. Went over their school improvement plan and some of the positive behavioral PBIS stuff they're doing. And Katie and I went to the Osgood PSO meeting on Tuesday this week too, and had a discussion about a variety of topics, updating parents on the progress with hiring the aides for kindergarten, discussion on RTI, security, Sergeant Lopes was there, so.
Great. Okay, I did not go to the AEC meeting. The last one was the same night that we were meeting about the kindergarten numbers and, you know, a plan for that. So there was really nothing on their agenda related to schools. Everything is pretty well set. So I skipped that one meeting. And I did go to the Osgood School Council meeting. I was a few minutes late. But it's the first one that I've been able to attend this year because of the contract negotiations have kind of taken me out of the loop on some of those things. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back into that a little bit. Anything else? Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for Wednesday, December 2nd. They look great, Tracy. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good care. I do have one question, but it's not related to your minutes. Under policy JKAA, physical restraint of students. Where it said the ESPs have not been trained yet, the goal is to have them trained by this month or next. Mrs. Cataldo said they will then train all other employees as it is required by law. Mrs. Cataldo will report back to the committee when training is completed. So we touched on that a little bit tonight, but I was just wondering where we are in the process.
Well, I said that I brought it back that you had requested that everybody be trained in January, and Ms. Mary Buchanan brought back the fact that she said there have been numbers of ESPs that have been trained, and she was
Okay,
getting me the list.
and you're gonna get it for us?
I have it.
Okay.
Yeah, there was
So-
training on the half day.
Again, that was before the comments, so.
Yep.
I also thought in that section again, like it's not entirely, when I read this, it seems like they're gonna be trained in doing a restraint, so should it maybe say trained in restraint policies?
Or protocol.
Protocols.
Protocols, okay.
So the ESPs have not been trained yet in,
Well, even the teachers, she further stated that every teacher has been trained in restraint, but they've been trained in restraint
Policy.
The policy,
Well,
got it.
Right, which we clarified tonight, so we'll go into tonight's minutes.
Minutes, okay.
keeping us honest,
Yeah,
yes,
no,
thank
we
you.
don't wanna-
Yeah, commingle
There
conversations.
was a conversation last week too, though, cause I misunderstood it, so I think it was kind of said both ways, but it wasn't really clear.
But I think since we didn't
Yeah.
have that
Conversation
kind
at
of
the last
conversation
meeting,
and that's
okay.
tonight,
So we'll leave it,
We can't
and have it
acknowledge-
captured in the next one.
Okay.
Agree.
Okay. All right, anybody else have comments?
They look,
do look very good.
they look beautiful.
Thank you, Tracy.
Tracy's the best.
So could I please have a motion to approve the minutes of December 2nd, 2015 school committee meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of Wednesday, December 2nd, 2015.
And do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I just think it's so exciting we're approving the minutes from the last meeting.
I know, it's awesome.
It's magical. It is magical.
Now if we could just have them all on the same website all at once, that would be a good thing.
Still haven't closed the fusion site.
Yeah,
Well,
good
Did you
luck.
find them?
Yeah, I think I navigate on the
Okay.
show.
Okay.
That was supposed to be
All right, and the meeting recordings were being put on the town website because they said that they couldn't put them on ours.
On those ones.
Sometimes you can go to YouTube and just,
place to get
yeah,
on the website.
Google Cohasset School Committee meeting and then put the date, and I didn't put that little extra, I thought, I didn't wanna inundate you with
Yeah, no, that's
information.
appreciate it.
So, but that little bar in the upper left-hand corner is key. It doesn't tell you what it is or what it does, but if you click on it, you can scroll through the meetings.
Well, some of the town links even, when you click on school committee, it links up to the fusion site.
Yeah,
Those are all-
it's, yeah.
The good news, we have a new school website. Bad news is that some of the information isn't work yet.
Not there yet,
Not
so
there.
we're working on it. We've only had that since September, so. And we're talking about years of meetings, so. Okay. Follow-up and updates?
Is that me?
Yes?
Well, I sent out after the last meeting,
Yep.
where we were, let me see, I sent it on the sixth, so, I didn't really, unless anyone has an update for me, I don't have any updates for
Okay.
you.
All right,
So-
that's fine.
No, I thought it was great, and again, thank you for doing this, cause
Yeah,
it does.
no, it's great. It does, like you said before about something else, it keeps us honest, you know, keeps things from falling through the cracks, so it's all good.
Right, so like, for example, November 18th, the concerts, the holiday concerts, so those are over, so that'll come off the next
Mhm.
Yep.
update.
Yep.
So, you know,
Yeah.
and if there are things that we're just gonna agree that we're not gonna update, then let me know and they'll come off as
Okay.
well.
Okay.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have no topics that that were not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of the meeting, so, we can move on to executive session. So, I'm sorry, we have to ask the public to leave.
No worries.
Oh, you don't wanna stay?
I appreciate everything.
So we need a motion?
Yes, so could I have a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of, exemption number 2, strategy related to bargaining with non-union personnel?
So moved.
Second.
Do I have a second? Okay. All in favor, roll call please?
I, Barbara Stefan.
I, Katie Do, present Katie Do.
I, Gina Stino.
I'm Mary McGoldrick.
I thought we were voting together.
Okay,
Sorry.
and then if, they're still recording until 11, so if you could.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got distracted.